The story begins on the day, which marked the end of the era full of mayhem and destruction, that there was a level 1 Manhwa impaired loser, Alchemist Moon, who lost his younger brother Sihuk, who was a qualified candidate for getting powers by the constellation, and even his crush Maki, to the destruction by the Demon King, but he was finally able to create the Philosopher's Stone on the last day. It was a tool that makes anything possible, as long as there was an equivalent exchange, which is met. With this stone, anything he desired was possible. Literally anything. What he desires now is simple: to strike back at the cause of Earth's destruction and the murderer of his younger sibling and crush. And if it was possible, Moon wanted to live a life free of being a Manhwa impaired virgin loser. But as soon as the stone was made, the Demon King sensed it and killed the Manhwa impaired brat. In an instant, the boy thought that he ended his regret-filled life that day, that the Philosopher's Stone mysteriously attached itself to him with a blood contract, and as he mysteriously opened his eyes, he found himself 11 years in the past. Realizing the overwhelming powers of the stone, Moon decided to rewrite the next 11 years and end his pitiful life as a Manhwa impaired outcast, so that he can end every miserable event that's bound to unfold. The scene was full of high-rise buildings, and Moon opened his eyes and was shocked to see that he was in his old studio apartment. Even when he was sure that his death was real, he wondered if the crimson-eyed Demon King was some kind of an illusion. But the boy almost jumped from his bed when he heard the vibration of his smartphone. He was feeling nostalgic to see the device that he used almost all the time when times were peaceful. But that's when he had another shocker, because he was in the year 2030, 11 years in the past. Moon was regressed to being a 28 years old, carefree adult, but nothing feels the same as it was in the past. Even when he knew that he was having magic ineptitude, and his vision is blurry with dulled senses, but he was not feeling anything. It was as if he was not having any impairment to begin with. The suffocating feeling of being weighed down by magic ineptitude was completely gone. Moon wanted to be completely sure, and opened his status window to check. That's when he found out that his magic ineptitude trait was completely replaced by the power of the Philosopher's Stone, and added to that, Moon had the title of Pioneer of Alchemy, and a whopping 1,012,500 achievement points. Moon realized that the Philosopher's Stone in his chest was converted into a trait after the regression. Moon was panting heavily, but with relief, because he never thought in his whole previous life that he will be free from magic ineptitude, which felt like shackles binding him. Moon was not able to handle these many things while being sober, so he decided to drink some beer while he thought about what else must have changed in this regressed life. He was sure that just with his magic ineptitude removed, many things will change in the future, and his overall stats have also been restored to their original state, because now he was normal. After gulping a whole can of chilled beer, Moon was finally happy, realizing about how good it tasted when everything was peaceful. He knew that for any level 1 newbie, the max they can get is 5 in all their stats. As he opened his status window, he saw that he was short by 1 stat point in strength and agility, but he had 5 stamina, which was okay. But then he noticed that his synthesis power was a whopping 10 points, making him a super rookie. He realized that, as the system has told him before, his magic power was completely changed with synthesis power, which was resulting in the magic ineptitude gone, because now Moon was not having any magic at all. But instead, he had rather become a unique stat holder, which was really amazing. And at level 1, being this powerful was pretty overwhelming. From his past, Moon he knew that only a handful of players get some kind of a unique stat, and now Moon was one of them. He knew that his future was bright because most of the people with unique traits rose to high-ranking positions, like his brother Sihuk. Now, after everything about the Philosopher's Stone was sorted, it was time for Moon to wonder about why he was having such a large amount of achievement points. Even he did not know about where he got them from, but he decided to worry about it once the achievement shop opens. After a while, he started looking at the title of Pioneer of Alchemy, which was a title given to an alchemist who has synthesized all mythical alchemy products and grants a small bonus related to synthesis. He was shocked to see the description of the title, because it was a growth-type, job-related title, and even his crush, who was relatively a latecomer among high-rankers, dominated the whole battlefield due to an overpowered title that she got from the celestial demon. Moon also had a title along with a unique stat. Now he started looking at the other titles he got, which included a title named One Who Attracts the Gaze of the Beyond. It was given to a personnel who had achieved something extraordinary, and even the gods of the world were having a look at them, whether it is luck or misfortune. Moon wondered about when he even got this title, and what exactly does the world beyond means. At last, when he was not able to understand anything, he thought that maybe it was just a useless title only up for show-off. This large information dump was a bit too much for Moon, as he slammed down onto his bed and just gazed onto the ceiling. Getting happy by the fact that his magic ineptitude has been cured, he decided to test it out while he was on the bed, and he closed his eyes, focusing with intent and starting to decompose the ignition formula. He was using the powers of the Philosopher's Stone to synthesize magic, and somehow he was able to form something flashy and blue for a few moments, but suddenly it completely disappeared. Moon realized that the magic attribute in his status window was completely removed, and even when the synthesis power came at the magic slot, using it doing magic was impossible. But as the Wo was an alchemy genius, he knew that if he draws some kind of a summoning circle, which is used for synthesis, things would be different, and he would be able to do magic easily. And since he had been given such a disadvantage of not using magic, then there must be a trade-off, which is really advantageous in the form of synthesis. As Moon started drawing the synthesis circle, the Philosopher's Stone started reacting as it pulsated in crimson red inside his chest. Moon wondered about what was happening, thinking that maybe his body was rejecting the circle. It was like the Philosopher's Stone was talking to Moon, rejecting his idea of using a synthesis circle, because it was a really primitive and inefficient way of doing synthesis. As Moon's body rejected the drawing of a synthesis circle, it was as if a deep jolt entered into his brain, as he remembered that before his death in his previous life, he was moving on his own because of the Philosopher's Stone, and only with a snap of the finger, Moon made his wish of getting a disease-free body possible. Just then, the boy realized that all he had to do was to think about what he wanted to synthesize. Moon decided to first synthesize a spear, and a golden spear appeared into his mind. The boy also wanted it to be full of special abilities or additional options, along with higher durability, and the only price he will have to pay for synthesis would be his synthesis power. After finalizing the spear, Moon finally snapped, but to his surprise, the Philosopher's Stone started reacting. While a surge of pain started crushing all the bones in the body of the bow, an urgent notification popped up, telling Moon that the synthesis power inside him was insufficient to achieve the desired synthesis. Moon started finding out about how he can cure the overwhelming pain, and the system told him that the Philosopher's Stone required 1 million achievement points to recover from its unstable state. Moon started thinking with whatever sanity he had, realizing that the Philosopher's Stone was the only thing that cured his magic ineptitude and even sent him back 11 years in the past. Moon decided to use the achievement points onto the Philosopher's Stone, and as soon as the points were consumed, the stone started shining with a blue aura, rather than a red, crimson, evil one, and the system told Moon that the stone had been fully recovered from its unstable state. Moon started smiling, realizing that alchemy has become much easier to handle now, and the same spear that he had materialized in his mind should be synthesized now. But even when Moon snapped his fingers once again, it was really anticlimactic, as nothing happened in front of him. The same notification popped up telling him that his synthesis power was insufficient. Moon even wondered about how much synthesis power was required to make a spear in, which is strong and had some abilities, because for him, this was getting annoying. Even in his past life when Moon suffered with magic ineptitude, he synthesized mystical products, but now the Philosopher's Stone was not letting him do it. But suddenly a notification popped up telling him that the stone was requesting 500 achievement points to establish the insufficient equivalent exchange. Moon wondered about how 500 points was worth anything after spending 1 million, and decided to spend it anyways. As soon as the required amount was met, Moon snapped the fingers once again, hanging with one last hope that his investment of points would be worth it. This time, even before Moon finished the snap, a yellow aura started surrounding him, all over his body and apartment, as yellow-colored lightning bolts raged from the sky, and a spear landed onto Moon's apartment floor, while breaking the window pane. And even surprising, the outsiders, who were just walking by Moon, was somehow able to not get injured. After this sudden impact, a notification popped up telling him that a constellation was watching him. The name of it was not disclosed, which was adding a layer of mystery to it. As the scene shifts, we come to a giant hallway, which was situated on a weirdly shaped rock that was touching the clouds. Inside the hallway, multiple godly beings gather, and some of them were getting happy because of the sudden appearance of Olympus lightning. Constellation Hermes and Athena were showing interest in the sudden appearance, and Moon was able to read everything from his status window, wondering about why the constellations were suddenly interested in him. A huge uproar started taking place because of the traces which were left by Moon, and only 3 kings out of all the constellations dared to remain seated, unfazed. Among them was the ruler of Olympus constellation, Zeus, who was showing great interest in the human who was able to summon Olympus lightning. Moon wondered about why the constellations were in such uproar. But just then, he remembered that it was because of the title of attraction from beyond that he was getting so much attention. As the scene shifts, we see a golden spear which was penetrated onto the apartment floor and was shimmering with golden lightning. Moon was unaware of this godly weapon, wondering about what caused so much commotion, and if the constellations were amused. Only after looking at some normal synthesis, it was only when Moon picked up the spear with great effort that a status appraisal window appeared and told him that this weapon was Astrophy, the spear of Zeus, which can wield lightning, but for some reason, it cannot fully exert its power. Moon realized about the abomination that he has synthesized. He remembered that Astrophy was the main weapon which was used by Thunder Emperor Alexander, who was a really high-ranking player in the whole country. Moreover, even when Alexander was a combat type who wielded a spear, his attack power rivaled the lightning magic type rankers. To think that Moon has synthesized such a weapon was completely out of his mind, but he knew that, compared to the real Astrophy, which incinerated everything around it just by being equipped, the weapon in front of him was just an imitation of grade 10, and due to it, even when Zeus was showing interest, he has not made any sponsorship offers yet. Just then, Moon pondered a little more and realized that the Philosopher's Stone never denied the complete synthesis of the legendary weapon, and it was only able to create an imitation. Due to the lack of synthesis power, Moon started smiling devilishly as he realized that he could actually synthesize the real Astrophy when he completed the synthesis requirement. For him, it was already amazing that his magic ineptitude was cured and he regressed 11 years. But if he can really synthesize mythical grade weapons just by fulfilling equivalent exchange, then the alchemy he had practiced his whole life would become an insane ability. But suddenly, just when Moon grabbed the spear in his hand, it dematerialized and was completely vanished. Moon realized that any completely synthesized material would actually disappear after some time. But then what about the achievement points that he had spent? It was a whopping 500 points, which was a lot, considering that Moon was still a level 1 rookie. For him, synthesis was an insane ability, but if he required these many achievement points every time, then it would really be so disheartening. But suddenly, the Philosopher's Stone, Moon started sending multiple notifications telling Moon that, according to its grade and level, some of the consumed achievement points will be returned. Hearing this, Moon opened the status window and saw that it was different, because now the levels and grades of the stone were not missing. He came to know that the stone was an F-grade item with the same level which Moon had. Moon started talking to the Philosopher's Stone embedded inside, asking him if the stone's growth would be influenced by Moon's growth, and hearing that the stone vibrated in an affirmative way, making Moon smile as he realized the full potential. He knew that magic-type players must go through casting, and even alchemy requires a synthesis circle and materials for synthesis. But even Moon had never realized how the one-snap synthesizing was this efficient. The bow was just snapping fingers and everything which was broken in his one-room studio apartment was fixed in an instant, without requiring much synthesis power. It was as if a clear revolution in the alchemy field had happened along with the magic category. Thanks to these many broken articles, Moon had properly practiced a new synthesis method, and his room was shining as brightly as ever. He knew that with this level of alchemy, the tutorial shouldn't be a problem, and from his past life, he already knew that the tutorial was going to happen at 5 p.m. on the same day. Even when he wanted to, Moon can never forget the tutorial day. He was called for being recognized as a true arena player, but in his past life, the event was so disastrous with his magic ineptitude that he could not even step into the territory and got his head pierced by an arrow just within 5 seconds of entering. But now he was not afraid. He had mastered alchemy to its epitome, and nothing can stop him. Moon was again feeling nostalgic after he picked up his phone, and as he looked at the home screen, he saw that there were more than 100 missed calls from his younger brother. Memories and flashbacks started appearing inside the bow's head, while he was feeling a bit embarrassing, because even when he was older, All the responsibilities were thrown at the younger one, and he completed the final year in no time, becoming a high-ranking player. In the past life, Moon was always frustrated, not ready to talk to his all-high and mighty brother. But now he realizes that the kid was just doing what he had to do to support the family, even when he was suffering so much from the inside. From his past life, Moon knew that the suitable candidate for the Galaxy Arena was his younger brother, but now the boy can change it and keep him safe like a true big brother. But before any of this can happen, Moon knew that he needed to fix his relationship with him. A lot of time had passed, and Moon was still thinking about what he should send to his younger brother in reply. And at last, he just typed a little hello and did not send it. But suddenly a shocker came in front of the boy. As he saw the name of Lee, his hands started trembling just after reading the name, because in the future, Lee was already dead. And the death must be gruesome, because Moon was not ready to stop shaking at all. He slammed down onto his bed once again, trying to calm himself down, because the death has not happened yet, and this time around, he can save his friend from it. Moon decided to not remember the gruesome incident, and instead he wanted to completely change it. Just then, Moon was shocked by a notification which told him that he had been selected for the arena tutorial. The system told Moon that he will be summoned to the tutorial shortly, and for that, he will have to prepare. The summoning time was in 10 minutes, and even the boy was ready to pass the test this time for sure, because the miserable life of a magic ineptitude user was going to get torn apart by this new, regressed individual. Moon smiled confidently while asking the system to give him an early entry. As the scene shifts, we come to the tutorial, and the event for the tutorial was territory conquest. We come inside a huge jungle, which was barricaded by some sort of energy barrier, with 100 participants competing with each other. We see Moon, who was smiling and getting nostalgic by the event, because the jungle map was completely the same. The participants will have to earn points by capturing territories or eliminating other players. And as soon as the tutorial was started, Moon started walking all over the area, because in the previous life, he didn't even last for 10 seconds. For now, he decided to play safe and aim for the top ranking. But just then, a system notification popped up telling him that Zeus was watching him with more intensity. Moon wondered about what the god wanted, and hearing that, the status window changed into the mission window, which was having a potential sponsorship offer. These things were usually unlocked after completing the tutorial first, but they were already open for gaining more attention from the lightning god. Moon will have to achieve first place in the tutorial, and the reward for it would be 1,000 achievement points. Moon started laughing by this offer, because this Zeus was ready to give 1,000 achievement points just for being the top participant in the tutorial. Moon knew that he will have to do this for the sake of gaining more achievement points for the future. But then Moon thought of something naughty and looked at the sky, wondering if Lord Zeus would add 100 more points in the initial reward. Just after hearing this, Zeus was angry as his lightning eyes started penetrating into the soul of the boy, who immediately told the god that he was just kidding. Moon thought that for someone who was supposed to be the ruler of Olympus, Zeus was surprisingly stingy. As the scene shifts, we see 2 trees full of blood splashes, and an adventurer who was lying down, his neck broken due to a sharp arrow penetrating it. Another participant was smiling. He was the archer who attacked the lifeless body, and the rewards he was getting from looting the lifeless body was actually more exciting for him, because even the consumables, which was carried by the participants, were of top-notch quality. We come to know that this adventurer was named Kim. Even when the guild told the Bray to just come back alive without killing, he was not able to resist looting multiple high-tier items, and after being expelled from the Magic Awakeners Academy, he decided to not remain an ordinary guild member and make the academy regret abandoning someone like him. As the scene shifts, we see that Moon was visiting all the familiar locations from his previous life, and this time, he reached a small river, which was flowing downstream. This was the place where Kim had been camping, and as soon as the brat looked at our bow, he thought that it was his lucky day, because Moon was not equipped with any kind of armor or weapon. Kim came ready with his bow while thanking Moon for the free kill, but he did not know that Arbo was deliberately sitting down near the stream, forgetting the free kill for himself. Instead, Moon snapped his fingers once again, and the arrow was snapped into 2 halves by a strange water jet from the stream. Moon was ready to attack while he started synthesizing multiple explosions of tree branches, so that Kim can actually go down onto the ground. Meanwhile, the brat wondered if Moon was actually a magic user. But even then, Kim was not ready to lose to someone with no equipment, and he got ready to fire an arrow once again. But just then, his arrow and his bow got snapped into two with some deafening explosions. While Moon was snapping his fingers from a distance, telling the brat that his movements were pretty good. By this time, Moon was just embarrassing the brat, telling him that next time he will aim right at the head, because killing someone with a snap of the finger was kind of satisfying. Hearing this made Kim snap in anger. While he started running towards the direction of the bow with the two broken parts of his bow, he was able to deflect all the explosive attacks of Moon. But just when Kim took out a small dagger from his back pocket, Moon announced that he knew that Kim was going to use swift movement, a B-grade trait, which he acquired after looting a lifeless body. Kim was really taken aback by hearing this, and stopped at the place where he was standing. And this was the exact moment that Moon was waiting for, immediately snapping his fingers and making the earth protrude like heavy spikes, piercing the chest of the brat and killing him. In an instant, Kim started coughing blood. While he wondered if Moon was from the Awakeners Academy. But hearing that, the boy just smiled, telling the brat that there was no way in hell that the Awakened Magic Academy would hire someone like him. With a final snap of the finger, Moon pierced Kim's chest all the way, and finally defeated him. As the lifeless body started dematerializing, Moon saw all over it and realized that the brat must be a rookie from some famous guild, and was using a high-quality connection device to enter the tutorial, resulting in the minimal real-world shock. Moon knew that if it was the regular arena instead of the tutorial, then he would be dead by now, because elimination in a regular arena means death even in the actual world. Moreover, these arenas don't just end with the deaths of the eliminated, and instead, all the undefeated monsters start coming out from the arena to where it was accessed from in the real world. For the same reason, the number of top rankers in the country was directly correlating to its national power. But even the strongest country was not able to stand their ground at the time of the Great Calamity, and they cannot stop the Great Outbreak from happening. But Moon knew that the calamity was way ahead in the future and he should focus on the present first. Finally, the boys started checking the current situation, and after looking at the leaderboards, he was shocked, because the kill counts of the top players was only 2 or 1. Even when it has been a while since the tutorial started, the boy realized that everyone was playing it safe in the early stages because it was a gold tier event, and the participants had high-level traits, stats and equipment. For a level 1 rookie, killing anyone also meant for them to be third-party, and they can easily lose the high-tier equipment they have brought into the arena. And as killing the participants was an optional thing to do, they were not making any move, and were instead working on getting more territory points for securing first place. But for now, Moon needs to get more familiar with his synthesis method. And due to it, he decided to go for more kills. Because no one was exciting enough, the boy decided to start sweeping all the people up who were trying to play it safe. A contestant sprinted through the terrain, his face twisted in fear. He glanced over his shoulder, describing his pursuer as insane and abnormal. Before he could react, a sharp protrusion shot up from the ground, impaling him instantly. The lifeless body slumped to the ground. As Moon emerged from the shadows, he calmly lowered the spike and examined the corpse, remarking that the contestant had been remarkably fast. Despite the heavy equipment the victim had been wearing, his speed had been impressive, a standout skill. Moon noted he admitted that if he hadn't acted first, catching the contestant would have been nearly impossible. As Moon stood over the body, another challenger appeared, armed and ready for battle. This new opponent moved swiftly, launching a precise attack aimed at taking Moon down. But Moon was prepared with practiced ease. He summoned another sharp protrusion from the ground, piercing the attacker's body and ending the fight. In an instant, Moon recognized the fallen contestant as Hyen's, a notorious player known for stealing kills and claiming them as his own. It was a fitting end for someone who relied on deceit. Shortly after the encounter, notifications flashed before Moon's eyes. His crafting level had increased, and to his surprise, the level of his Philosopher's Stone had also risen. Moon knew that leveling up in the early stages of the match was expected, but the Philosopher's Stone's progression was unexpected. He reflected on his strategy of targeting weaker, more cowardly opponents, which had yielded better results than he'd anticipated. With 11 kills now under his belt, Moon felt a sense of security. He no longer had to worry about being ambushed from behind. His attention turned to the nearby point collection zone. As he approached, something unusual caught his eye. A large number of contestants lay dead just outside the zone. Moon quickly hid behind a tree to assess the situation. He was puzzled. How had so many players been killed in one place? He requested an update on the match's progress, and discovered that four contestants were close to reaching the required points to advance. Analyzing the data, Moon realized these four had been among the top-ranked players since the match began. It was clear they had formed a team. A direct violation of the match's rules. Moon stayed hidden, his mind racing. He couldn't understand why these players would resort to cheating in what was supposed to be a training program. It seemed ridiculous to him. He tried to deduce their strategy, concluding that they had likely set up a trap inside the point collection zone. Their formation probably consisted of a shield bearer at the front for protection, an archer covering the rear, and two sword wielders guarding the flanks. It was a nearly impenetrable setup. Moon had been conserving his energy throughout the match, especially since the task reward had been halved. But now, faced with this unfair advantage, he had no choice. He decided to unleash his full power. If these players wanted to cheat their way to victory, he would turn the tables on them himself. The scene shifted to the team's archer, a woman named Lee. She stood idly chewing gum out of boredom. The shield bearer, Ji-won, asked if she saw anyone approaching. Lee replied that it seemed no one else was coming. Ji-won pressed her, questioning if her aura had weakened and affected her vision. Lee snapped back, explaining that her enhanced sight relied on magic, not aura. She added that Ji-won's low kill count wasn't her problem, and reminded him that no one had forced him to take on the role of shield bearer. Their argument grew heated, until one of the sword wielders, Khan, stepped in to mediate. Khan was the team's leader, and he urged them to focus. He informed Ji-won that he had achieved 60% of the required points, and assured him that the team would help increase his kill count. Ji-won was surprised but grateful, expressing his trust in Khan. Lee, still bored, asked Khan if she could leave the point collection zone. She argued that there was no activity and no reason to stay. Khan hesitated, but Lee reassured him that Moon wasn't a threat. She had checked the names of all the guild members and hadn't found his name. Khan pointed out that this was precisely what worried him. Someone unknown, like Moon, had already killed 11 contestants. Lee dismissed his concerns, arguing that most of the participants were weak and that Moon's success was likely due to trickery. She questioned why, if Moon were truly strong, he hadn't reached the point collection zone yet. Grabbing Kang's arm, Lee suggested they sweep the area outside the zone in their prepared formation. She reminded him that they had trained extensively for this match and were well equipped. Khan recalled their previous defeat, which had motivated them to work harder this time. Their guild Scorpion had provided them with high-quality equipment, and they were now operating as a cohesive team. Still, Lee's distraction was a concern. Lee seemed distracted, her focus wavering as she tried to reassure Khan. She insisted that their teamwork was solid and that no unknown player could pose a real threat to them. But as she spoke, her gaze drifted away. Using her magical sight, she scanned the area, and suddenly spotted someone hiding behind a distant tree. Without hesitation, she raised her bow, nocked an arrow, and alerted Khan to the intruder's presence. She called out to Moon, informing him that she could see him hiding, and fired the arrow. Moon reacted instantly, creating an earthen barrier that shattered the arrow mid-flight. The team was stunned. Khan wondered if this was some kind of magic, while Lee stared in disbelief. Moon, still hidden, realized that Lee's magical sight must be rank B, a high-level skill. Lee was shocked and demanded to know how he could tell the rank of her ability. Moon calmly replied that his knowledge came from extensive study of skills. Determined to test his claims, Lee nocked another arrow, declaring she'd see if his expertise held up. Before she could fire, Khan stepped forward and addressed Moon directly. He asked if Moon was the one who had killed 11 contestants. Moon in turn asked who Khan was. Khan introduced himself, and Moon quickly deduced that Khan was the first-ranked player and the team's leader. Khan, not wanting to waste time, extended an unexpected offer. He invited Moon to join their team. The rest of the team immediately objected. Lee questioned Kang's judgment, while Ji-won the shield bearer accused Khan of losing his mind. Ji-won argued that they couldn't trust Moon not to betray them. Khan, however, stood firm. He explained that Moon, despite lacking special equipment, had managed to kill 11 players, a feat that suggested he was an S-rank magic user. Khan believed Moon could become the core player of their team, significantly boosting their chances of success. Lee grabbed Kang's shoulder, insisting he was crazy. She pointed out that if Moon turned against them, he could wipe out the entire team with his magic. Khan countered that The benefits of having a mage on their side far outweighed the risks. He reminded Lee that magic users were rare, even within their powerful guild Scorpion. Privately, Kong reflected that killing 11 players was no small feat, even if it had been achieved through trickery. He turned back to Lee, trying to convince her that adding Moon to their team would elevate their status within the guild. Moon, listening to the debate, interrupted sarcastically. He pointed out that they were discussing his potential membership, as if he'd already agreed to join. Kong assumed Moon's arrogance was typical of mages, but Moon corrected him, saying he wasn't like that. He then asked what the real problem was with their team formation. Kong explained that their guild cared only about results, not rules or public opinion. He warned Moon that this was his final chance to join them. Quietly, Moon unimpressed replied that he expected such arrogance from members of the Scorpion Guild. He declared there was no point in continuing the discussion, and began to use his abilities. Addressing Kong, Moon warned him to worry about his own life rather than Moon's opportunities. With a swift motion, Moon unleashed a thunder strike that engulfed the area. In blinding light and deafening sound, the team was overwhelmed. The shield bearer, Ji-won, stared in terror as Moon crafted a spear, crackling with lightning. Moon gripped the weapon and declared that first place was his. He mocked the idea of joining their team, calling it pathetic. Kong, furious, shouted that negotiations were over, and called out to Lee. She responded instantly, firing another arrow at Moon. Moon pointed his thunder-charged spear at the team, and a massive surge of lightning energy rushed toward them. The attack left them frozen, unable to react. Their screams echoed as they collapsed to the ground. Unconscious, Moon felt a surge of satisfaction. He noted that he had only used 10% of the spear's power, yet the results were devastating. However, as Moon surveyed the scene, he felt something was off. Suddenly, he noticed Kong rushing at him from behind, sword in hand. Kong had somehow escaped the initial thunder strike and was now attempting to strike Moon down. Moon quickly aimed the spear at Kong, but before he could unleash another lightning blast, Kong vanished from sight. Moon realized that Kong wasn't a rank player with a shadow movement skill, a rare ability that allowed him to evade attacks and move undetected. This explained how Kong had survived the first strike. Moon now faced a new challenge, defeating a skilled opponent who could disappear into the shadows at will. Kong reappeared behind Moon, using his shadow movement skill to position himself undetected. Seizing the opportunity, he raised his sword and shouted, "Die," as he swung at Moon. But before the blade could connect, Moon snapped his fingers. A sharp protrusion shot up from the ground, piercing Kong. Instantly, Kong gasped in shock, asking how Moon had managed to attack. After expending so much energy with the lightning strike, Moon calmly explained that the two actions were entirely different. He then pointed his spear at Kong, unleashing another burst of thunderous energy that knocked Kong out of the match. Notifications flashed announcing Moon as the winner of the match. With a total of 15 kills, he earned the title ruler of the training match and received 100 achievement points. Moon felt a pang of frustration, thinking that if he hadn't used the spear, he could have earned 1,000 points instead. Just then, another notification appeared. Zeus was pleased with his performance and granted him an additional 100 points. Moon calculated his total points, which now mounted to 750. He was thrilled knowing these points would carry over into the real world, and he eagerly anticipated what lay ahead. The scene shifted to the Scorpion Guild's headquarters, where Kong and his team stood. In the office of the guild's vice president, the vice president was furious. He slammed his hands on the desk and demanded an explanation. "How does this make any sense?" he roared. "This wasn't an ambush or a loss to another team. You were completely defeated by one unarmed person." Kong apologized, admitting he had no excuses. The vice president retorted that he wasn't angry about losing due to skill. Skill was something money couldn't buy, but losing as a team was unacceptable. The vice president stormed over to Kong and slapped him hard across the face. He turned to the rest of the team, his voice dripping with anger. "I cannot comprehend or overlook this," he said. "Forming a team only to lose like this tarnishes the guild's reputation. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done?" Kong apologized again, taking full responsibility as the team leader, but the vice president dismissed his words. He handed Kong a stack of papers, a penalty contract designed for players who failed despite the guild's full support. Kong hesitated, unsure of what the contract entailed. The vice president explained that all rewards the team earned over the next 10 years would go directly to the Scorpion Guild. He ordered Kong to sign it immediately. Ji-won, The shield bearer tried to protest, calling the contract excessive, but the vice president grabbed him by the neck and threatened him, demanding to know if he was foolish enough to defy the guild. Struggling to breathe, Ji-won apologized, and the vice president released him reluctantly. The team signed the contract. Meanwhile, in Seoul, the headquarters of the Seonsom Guild buzzed with activity. Guild director Park sat in his office, speaking with 3 players who had participated in the match, including Kon. Park expressed his disbelief at the outcome. "I don't blame you for losing," he said, "but what happened defies logic." One of the players, Young, agreed, adding that he was shocked by Moon's reckless use of magic and the absurdity of him achieving 15 kills. Another player remarked that Moon had single-handedly taken down a team of 4-ranked players, a feat that seemed impossible. Park reassured the players that the Seonsam Guild didn't punish members for losing matches. He encouraged them to focus on improving their performance next time. After they left, Park turned to his assistant, Yoon, and asked if she had discovered anything about Moon. Yoon replied that they were still investigating, but confirmed that the 4-person team Moon had defeated was from the Scorpion Guild. She noted that 3 of them were B-rank players, and 1 was a rank. Park skimmed through the report. Yoon handed him his brow furrowed in thought. How did Moon defeat them alone? He wondered aloud. Yoon speculated that Moon belonged to the magic class and might have used powerful fire-based abilities. The Park questioned how a level 1 player could achieve such a feat, especially since casting such spells usually took considerable time. Yoon pointed out that Moon had executed his magic with just a snap of his fingers, suggesting his abilities might be S rank or higher. Park leaned back in his chair deep in thought. "There's something more significant at play here," he said. "Even someone with incredible abilities would have limitations at level 1. Yoon asked if Park was suggesting that Moon had the backing of a constellation, a powerful entity that could grant extraordinary abilities. Park nodded, saying it was the only plausible explanation. Yoon objected, arguing that Moon was just a level 1 player who had succeeded in a training match. It seemed unlikely that he had constellation support. Park sat in his office deep in thought. The possibility that Moon had the backing of a constellation lingered in his mind. Since the emergence of the arena in 2015, constellations had only shown interest in diamond rank players and above. They had never paid attention to lower ranks. Yoon, his assistant, chimed in, agreeing that Moon was no ordinary player. "Regardless of the truth," she said, "it's clear we need to recruit him. Other guilds won't stay silent either." She laughed, adding that they'd have to put in extra effort to secure him. Yoon was startled when Park suddenly began speaking to someone she couldn't see. He addressed the unseen person as the guild leader and asked for their opinion. Confused, Yoon watched as flames erupted in the office, and a beautiful woman materialized. She introduced herself, casually, telling Park to address her informally, since they were alone. She asked when he had noticed her presence, despite her using a rank stealth skill in. Park admitted he hadn't noticed her at first, but felt her presence when they started discussing Moon. He then inquired about the reason for her visit and her upcoming graduation. The woman, whom Park called Miss June, sat on the desk in front of him. She explained that she was bored and that the academy no longer held any significance for her. Park suggested she focus on the arena instead, to which she replied that she had already participated. She then asked angrily if he had watched her live broadcast. Park apologized, explaining that he had been busy investigating unexpected reports. Miss June dismissed his apology, grabbed the report from his desk and began reading it. Despite Park's protests, she insisted there was no issue, since she was the owner of the guild. As she scanned the report, her eyes landed on Moon's name. Meanwhile, Moon had just exited the match. Exhausted, he collapsed onto his bed, relieved the day was finally over. Notifications popped up informing him that his level had increased by 2 ranks. He checked the details and discovered that the Philosopher's Stone had also leveled up by 1 rank. Moon remarked that if not for the Philosopher's Stone, he could have reached level 3 by now. He requested his status display as the pioneer of alchemy and confirmed he was indeed level 3. However, Moon noticed that his strength, agility and vitality were still weak compared to his crafting power. He observed that while the gap was significant, his current state was much better than before. The combination of his lower level and the higher level of the Philosopher's Stone made him stand out more in the arena. He reasoned that this made sense, since most participants were around level 3. If he alone possessed hidden additional levels, it would give him a substantial advantage, allowing him to outperform others easily. Satisfied, Moon decided to check his title status. He found that his existing titles hadn't changed, which reminded him of his crush's frustration. When her title remained unchanged, he realized this was normal. Moon then noticed a new title, Ruler of the Tutorial Matches, awarded for achieving a decisive victory. However, no benefits were listed for this title. Reflecting on the similarity among titles, he observed that titles often seem undervalued for some unknown reason. He noted that obtaining a title early on was rare, but not undesirable, as multiple titles could lead to more rewards from the achievement store, a feature available only to gold-ranked players. Moon began contemplating the best way to invest his current points. He wondered if he should allocate them all to transmutation energy. While the Philosopher's Stone was powerful, it still adhered to the principle of equivalent exchange in alchemy. Moon reflected on the 1,500,000 points he had previously spent feeling a pang of irritation. He realized that focusing solely on enhancing transmutation or crafting power might not be the best choice. Instead, he considered raising all his skills to the intermediate level of 5. At that moment, a new idea struck him. He asked the Philosopher's Stone if it could create anything, regardless of what it was. The stone responded with a signal that Moon interpreted as confirmation. Excited, Moon asked if it could create a human body. However, the stone remained silent. Moon understood that this was impossible, likely because human transmutation was forbidden in alchemy. He recalled that familiar transformations often involved creating fantastical creatures, which sometimes appeared as monsters in the arena. Moon planned to use these techniques for good, just as scientific advancements had benefited humanity in the 21st century. Yet he questioned himself, wondering if he would only use this power for good. After a moment of reflection, he answered confidently, yes, that was his intention. Moon hesitated before admitting that if circumstances forced him to make different decisions, he might not be able to predict his actions. His goals were critical, and he was willing to take risks to achieve them. Just then, the Philosopher's Stone spoke to him again. Moon responded, affirming that he understood the dangers of human transmutation. However, the stone surprised him by saying that the real problem was not what Moon thought. It was confused. Moon asked the Philosopher's Stone about the relationship between the artifact and the Emerald Tablet. Was the stone referring to another artifact similar to the Emerald Tablet, containing comparable knowledge? After receiving the stone's response, Moon realized that it made sense. The Emerald Tablet had no information about human transmutation. When he first acquired it, he thought it was a test of qualification. At that time, he successfully passed, and the tablet acknowledged him as its owner. Moon had sought the Emerald Tablet because it was an artifact that could only be used by its rightful owner. Anyone who tried to steal it would be burned to ashes. He recalled how the tablet killed those who failed its qualification test. Thinking back, he admitted he was terrified by the thought that he could have been reduced to ashes had he failed. Now, he wondered if the Philosopher's Stone was worried he might fail a similar qualification test for this new formula. Would it be safer to abandon the idea of human transmutation? The stone's response shocked him. Could it really be possible to avoid the penalties of failing qualifications? Moon asked the stone a definitive question. Could it prevent death? After hearing the answer, he declared he was ready to begin. As long as he could not die, he could recover from anything. Determined, Moon allocated all his points to enhance his transmutation power. He then asked the stone what materials were needed for the formula. The stone explained that the formula was similar to the Emerald Tablet, but had a different color. Moon concentrated, imagining the artifact with a deep black, purple hue, instead of emerald green. He noticed that the information from the stone was presented in a way that felt as intuitive as using a modern smart device, making it easy to understand. Suddenly, a notification appeared. Moon's current transmutation power was insufficient to complete the formula. He expected this. Another notification followed, stating that the Philosopher's Stone required 10,000 achievement points to complete the equivalent exchange. The system asked if he agreed. Frustrated, Moon questioned whether the stone was serious about demanding such a large number of points. He hadn't expected such a high price. His anger grew when the stone insisted that it was a small price to pay. Moon tried to negotiate, pointing out that the spear had only cost 500 points, but the stone didn't let him finish his argument. With a deep sigh, Moon lamented the loss of his 10,000 points in one go. However, he quickly calmed himself, reminding himself that there were no gains without risks. He pressed the button to transfer the points. A notification confirmed the deduction, and immediately, he felt an unusual sensation Immense energy coursed through his body. The energy felt familiar. Standing in the middle of a massive aura surrounding him, Moon snapped his fingers. Something strange happened. A purple hue swirled around his body, concentrating around his hands. Curious, he asked the Philosopher's Stone if this entity was alive. New notifications arrived. Moon had successfully created an unregistered legendary artifact and earned 5,000 achievement points. Additionally, his title Pioneer of Alchemy had evolved. He now had a new advantage, a 5% reduction in energy consumption for transmutation. Moon smiled. This meant his efficiency would increase as his level rose. If his title continued to evolve, the energy reduction would grow as well. He realized that this was why titles were considered growth-type benefits. As he reflected on his achievement, more notifications appeared. His accomplishments had drawn the attention of powerful constellation entities, including the Black Goat. He noticed that discussions about him were happening in the arena, although he didn't fully understand what this meant. He knew it was significant. Then a new notification outlined the capabilities of the obsidian tablet. It revealed that the tablet was only a 20% replica, but it possessed immense and limitless power. Frustrated, Moon exclaimed that this was just the other replica. Just like Astrophy, he had spent 10,000 achievement points only to create a copy, while Astrophy had only cost 500 points. Still, he wondered if this meant he wouldn't experience the negative rebound effects of using the formula. The Philosopher's Stone responded. Moon looked at his hands with relief. He would not endure the same agony he had suffered before. Examining the obsidian tablet, he noticed its effects were permanent. They would not dissipate. Then a realization struck him. If 10,000 achievement points increased completeness by 20%, then he could gain full completeness with 40,000 points. This meant he could multiply his investment 4 times. Overjoyed, Moon embraced the obsidian tablet. It was an incredible creation. Just then the Philosopher's Stone spoke to him again. Moon reassured it that he was prepared for any penalties resulting from unqualified use. Moon pulled out his phone, his fingers moving swiftly as he programmed a message into the Philosopher's Stone. He instructed it to notify his brother with a single touch if anything were to happen to him. Moon was no stranger to pain. He had endured more than most could imagine. The diseases spread by the arena had left him scarred, both physically and mentally, but he had learned to embrace the suffering, believing that great rewards required great sacrifices. His attention shifted to the obsidian tablet in his hands. This time, he was confident his calculations were precise, and he was certain there would be no penalties. As he focused on the tablet, purple tendrils began to emerge, swirling around him like ethereal vines. They had appeared before, but this time, they didn't harm him. He thought about the original owner of the tablet, the celestial Black Goat, a being of immense power and mystery. If the tablet was tied to such an entity, Moon reasoned it wouldn't harm him. He trusted his instincts, but his calm was short-lived. A new notification flashed before his eyes, startling him. The replica obsidian tablet sought to merge with the Philosopher's Stone. Before Moon could react, excruciating pain shot through his body. Purple tendrils sprouted from his skin, wrapping around him like chains. He gasped, struggling to comprehend what was happening to his horror. The Philosopher's Stone had agreed to the merger without his consent. The pain intensified, spreading through every fiber of his being. Moon screamed, his voice echoing in the empty space around him. "Stop. This is madness," he pleaded, but the stone remained silent. The tendrils continued to spread, their purple glow growing brighter. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the merging concluded. The tendrils receded and the pain subsided. Moon collapsed to the ground, his body trembling with exhaustion. Notifications began to appear, one after another. The Philosopher's Stone had leveled up, gaining new abilities as a result of the merge. Moon stared at the messages, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Meanwhile, in another part of the arena, a new match was about to begin. The notification system announced the game mode attack. 50 participants would be divided into teams of 5 with teamwork as the primary condition. Players began to enter the match, their expressions a mix of excitement and apprehension. Among them was Kim, who had faced Moon in a previous match. Kim frowned as he read the details. Teamwork was essential, but he knew how difficult it could be to coordinate with strangers in the heat of battle. He glanced around, noting the diverse group of players gathering in the arena. Why is a silver rank difficulty match happening during the evaluation phase? He wondered aloud. It didn't make sense, unless… His thoughts trailed off as he remembered the monster human who had defeated him in the previous match. Moon. Could this be because of him? Kim clenched his fists. If that was the case, then this was his chance to prove himself. As more players entered, a group caught Kim's attention. They moved with confidence, their equipment gleaming under the arena lights. Kim's eyes narrowed as he recognized the emblem on their gear, the Scorpion Guild. The Scorpion Guild was infamous, known for its ruthless tactics and twisted sense of realism. They were more than just competitors. They were villains who thrived on chaos and destruction. The Scorpion members noticed Kim standing alone. Their leader, a tall man with a cold, calculating gaze, approached him. "Teams are supposed to have 5 members, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Where's your team?" The leader smirked, his eyes scanning Kim from head to toe. "We'll soon find out who the standout stars are today," he said, his tone laced with arrogance. Kim remained silent, his jaw clenched. He knew better than to engage with them, but the leader wasn't done. He noticed the emblem on Kim's equipment and raised an eyebrow. "Soon Sam Guild. I haven't heard of you. Looks like you just came out of the educational match." Even in a chaotic match, Soon Sam wouldn't provide its members with equipment below grade C. "You must have failed the ranking test." Kim's hands tightened into fists, his nails digging into his palms. He wanted to lash out to make them pay for their mockery, but he couldn't. The Scorpion Guild was stronger than him. He had to be patient, but the leader stepped closer as he told Kim to just follow their instructions, and they will handle everything. Kim understood what that meant. They would take all the rewards, leaving him with nothing. At that moment, another participant arrived. Kim's eyes widened as he recognized the newcomer. It was none other than Moon, the player who had defeated him in the previous match. Kim felt a mix of emotions, anger, frustration, but also a flicker of respect. Moon had proven himself to be a formidable opponent, and Kim couldn't deny his skill. The leader of the Scorpion Guild team stood laughing, mocking the situation. He commented that this was completely unexpected, and that the arena's matchmaking system was acting strangely. Still grinning, he said he could understand why a player from the Soon Sam Guild was here, but he was curious about the fool who had entered without any equipment. Moon stepped forward and asked if the leader was calling him a fool. The leader ignored Moon's courtesy, raising his spiked ball to Moon's face. Sarcastically, he asked if Moon even knew who he was talking to. Moon sighed and asked if the leader was insulting him. He was about to respond when something unexpected happened. The Philosopher's stone reacted on its own. Suddenly, Moon heard its voice in his head speaking directly to the leader, hurling insults and threats that Moon himself hadn't said. Only Moon could hear the stone, and its words were shocking. It threatened the leader, and Moon was trying to quiet the stone, but it wouldn't stop. Worse, it demanded that Moon continue patting it to keep it calm. Moon thought to himself that if he had known this would happen, he would have done anything to stop the obsidian tablet from merging with the Philosopher's Stone. Meanwhile, the Scorpion Guild members watched Moon in confusion. They assumed he was terrified and didn't understand why he was acting so strangely. Their leader laughed again, mocking Moon, asking if he had stepped back out of fear. One of the members commented that there was no need to ask. It was obvious Moon was scared. Another added that Moon probably wasn't even part of a guild. The leader smirked and told his team that Moon might be one of those freeloaders who took advantage of kind-hearted people for equipment. Then turning back to Moon, he said that he was now up against Cho, someone far stronger than his previous opponents. Moon quickly realized that all this talk was meant to criticize his lack of equipment. He calmly responded, saying that if they thought that way, they were completely mistaken. Cho's face darkened in anger. He slammed his spiked ball into the ground, demanding to know if Moon thought they were fools to believe his words. Moon, unfazed, smiled and asked if his name was Cho. Then he remarked that this whole situation was quite amusing. He explained that at higher levels, players who specialized in magic or support abilities often didn't rely on equipment. Then noticing the guild emblem on their armor, he asked if they were from the Scorpion Guild. Cho assumed Moon was trying to talk about their guild to get on their good side, but Moon's next words shocked them all. He said he had no respect for them, and didn't even consider them human. The Scorpion Guild members exploded in rage. They shouted insults at Moon, demanding to know how he dared to speak to them that way. Cho stepped forward, gripping his spiked ball tightly. His voice was filled with fury as he asked if Moon really thought he could talk to them like that. Without warning, Cho charged at Moon, swinging his weapon with all his strength, declaring that he would crush him. Moon was ready to snap his fingers with a hint of confidence gleaming in his face. And as soon as Bo snapped his fingers, the weapon was suddenly stopped, and the man started shaking like crazy. After the snap, Moon was able to stop the leader at its place, grabbing his weapon immediately, while a green aura surrounded him, and a muscular hand got synthesized, which was increasing the strength of the bow more than 10 times. The leader was not able to believe that he was being overpowered by a pathetic-looking guy, but he cannot do anything, even if he wanted to, because this was quite surprising for him, and he did not have any counter for it. Moon started mocking the leader, telling him that he thought that the leader's high agility came from speed, but it was strength that was his main stat, or maybe it was nothing at all and just a basic title or trait that gave him a boost. Cho was making distorted faces, wondering about why Moon was not even flinching, and the other team members of the Scorpion Guild were ready to protect their leader, jumping onto the sky from both sides and attacking Moon, who was busy with their leader. But to everyone's surprise, one of them was immediately sent to hell by Kim, who told everyone that he had been fighting to and that they should not keep the eyes away from their enemies. The last member of the team was shocked, jumping towards Kim with insane speeds, getting ready to kill him. But even before the man can do anything, Moon snapped once again, and the brat was hit by a stone protrusion, which pierced his chest, sending the bastard straight up to hell, just like how Kim was eliminated in the previous entrance round. The leader was desperate, looking at his teammates, who were just falling down like useless dummies. He realized that Moon was having the A-rank strength trait, along with strength and agility focused stat distribution in just one hand. He wondered about how Moon was this strong, even when he was a newbie, but this irritated the boy so much, and he snapped the weapon into two while asking the man if he still had energy to shout this much. Cho was shocked after looking at his powerful A-ranked weapon, which was completely broken like a doll by a bow. Looking at the shocked face of the man, Moon complimented him, telling him that this was the face that suited him the most. According to Moon, the leader had nothing or no one to blame, because he was the one who tried to attack Moon first, even when he was talking politely. The leader was looking at the end of his life by his own two eyes as he thought that not everyone should not be messed with. Blood was splattered all around the arena, while Moon was looking at the lifeless body with a serious face, realizing that the arena was of a high difficulty, which was far beyond a typical silver-ranked offense, but it also meant that the rewards for creating it were much greater than any usual arena. And as it was the attacking category, he knew that the fewer members left after the round, the more rewards it will receive. And that's why the people are so aggressive about the gear that the other people have. Moon realized that the strength that he had synthesized was from a skill named Ogre's Body Tissue, and only 15% of the power was used while dealing with the leader. Moon realized that the risk of holding the qualification of the Obsidian Tablet was high, but if he was able to form a perfect arm, then it was all worth it. And it was due to it that Moon had considered the fusion request of the Philosopher's Stone valid. But suddenly Moon was disturbed by Kim, who was standing behind him and started thanking the boy for saving him, but Moon was aware of the fact that he had killed his own teammates, and only one of them was left. But opposite to what Kim had thought, Moon had completely forgotten about him and wondering about who he was. After contemplating for a while, Moon remembered that Kim was the one that he fought by the river. But this time, the brat was a little bit more optimistic, getting ready to shake the hands of Moon, while introducing himself as Kim from Seung Sam Guild. After hearing the name of the guild, Moon was shocked, realizing that it was the same guild which was owned by June. Kim wondered if he had said something wrong to Moon, but the boy ignored it, telling him that he was just lost in thought for a second. Moon agreed to shake hands with Kim, wishing that they should do their best together and secure this round. Kim was a bit unsure about how they will do it when there were only 2 members, but Moon knew that as killing teammates was considered as accidents, the system would not assign replacements for them, and they will have to do it, even if they are just 2 in a 5-man team. After a while, all participants were matched, and the arena started with the time limit of 30 minutes. Both Kim and Moon were teleported to the jungle arena, where they have fought before, and Moon started going towards their objectives without even wasting a second, because they were already short on numbers, and they should do everything as fast as they can. But suddenly, Moon noticed that Zeus was looking at him along with Black Goat, who expressed deep satisfaction with his previous actions. Moon was shocked to know that both Zeus and the Black Goat were looking at him because he was not even a high-ranked individual, and he was just taking a placement test. So he wondered about why these 2 constellations were so interested in him, because they don't constantly watch even their own sponsored players, but they were continuously watching Moon. After a while, the system told Moon that the target location had been set to Goblin Stronghold, and they will have to clear the target area by any means within the time limit. After that, the clock started ticking. Moon was shocked, wondering about why they were given a stronghold to clear in just 30 minutes. These strongholds were commonly referred to as checkpoints, and they were always varying slightly according to the environment and shape depending on the map. But the problem was that Moon was not so high-leveled, and wondered about why the Goblin Stronghold appeared in front of him, because checkpoint structures typically only appear in ranks of at least Platinum or higher. But just then, Moon started using his brain a little more, and realized that the Scorpion Guild Trio and Kim have surpassed the placement test levels, and Moon was already overpowered with that thunder weapon and synthesis, and getting a stronghold might be due to it. But on the upside, the rewards will surely be worthwhile for completing this. Moon started smiling while thinking that since it has come to this, he would just wipe the goblins out and take all the kill rewards without holding back. Moon turned around asking Kim if he had the desire to rack up kills for completing the round, but Kim was really afraid of goblins, as he knew that he just passed the tutorials, and these filthy creatures were way out of his league. So instead of killing, he just preferred to safely collect the clear rewards. Moon smiled even brighter, telling him that it was a relief, and they can strategize together accordingly, and he can monopolize the kills. As the scene shifts, we see a goblin with a sharp nose who was smiling brightly as it was the time for shift change, and it was exciting for him. Two soldiers were guarding the walls of the stronghold, while one of them told the other that he hated standing guard because it was boring. But the other told his companion that they should do what they are told, because the boss was in a really bad mood, and if they do anything other than what they are ordered, that they will really get scolded or even killed. But suddenly we see that Moon jumped up onto the security wall and attacked both the goblins together, while a purple aura was surrounding him and his hands. It was the Black Panther tissue skill, which was the 12% replica of the original, copying the physical abilities of the Black Panther. The goblins were straight up gone to hell, while Moon was shocked, because goblins were really sensitive creatures, and they should have sensed a human being if he had not used the skill. But Moon was feeling a bit of a discomfort, realizing that multi-body synthesis was extremely demanding. The Philosopher's Stone told the boy that the fact that he was handling multi-body synthesis is already insane, and he should not actually dream of anything else for a while. But suddenly Moon noticed that Kim was behind him, wondering if they can really do this alone. After witnessing the power that Moon possessed, Moon started explaining that he had already scanned through all the goblins before ambushing, and their weapons just included some stones and poison needles, and these things won't be able to pierce Kim's armor, making him safe even when he safely collected the clear rewards. Both Moon and the brat started going inside the stronghold for their own objectives, and as the scene shifts, we see that inside the stronghold, multiple goblins were just partying like usual, eating large chunks of meat while complimenting the taste. But suddenly one of them was shocked, while he heard the running footsteps of a human, who was none other than Kim with his shining sword. The goblins immediately turned around and decided to massacre all the humans. But suddenly one of the goblins noticed something and smiled devilishly, telling all the others that Kim was actually alone, which was really crazy of him to do. All the goblins started using their slingshots, throwing big and small rocks onto the brat, and even when Kim was not getting seriously injured, it was really annoying for him. The goblins started taunting the human, asking him if this was all that he had got, telling him that with this level of power, he cannot pass. And instead, he was completely trapped. As Kim turned around, he saw that whatever goblins were saying was indeed true, because he was surrounded by 1,000s of them from all around. Kim started fighting with the goblins, who were jumping and attacking on him, slashing and hacking through them. As even he was getting attacked, Kim groaned in pain, while he cursed the goblins for attacking the only blind spot he had. But he knew that he needed to hold on for just a little more, and he started attacking the goblins, even when he was alone. After a while of defending, Kim started shouting that now was the time for striking down, and the scene shifts as we see that the whole sky was darkened while Moon called out to Astrophy and commanded the weapon to strike down onto the goblins. A yellow thunder sparked onto the dark sky, and it turned into a huge lightning bolt as Astrophy ended straight onto the middle of the goblin crowd, electrifying all of them in one go. Meanwhile, The Philosopher's Stone was minimizing the rebound achievement points, and 50 achievement points had been restored. Even after using the weapon, the whole battlefield was turned into a ground full of corpses of goblins, and even Kim was shocked, realizing about how instant it was, wondering about how it was even possible. But Moon ignored the bow, asking the system window to open. Moon was curious as to why, even after the Philosopher's Stone was increased in grade, the achievement points restored were still the same. That the Philosopher's Stone answered Moon, telling him that no synthetic material would interfere with rebound and that only the stone can manage it, and at the very least, Moon will have to reach the B grade for the points to increase substantially. But suddenly, Moon came to know that Zeus was approving the efficient use of astrophy with a smile, and sponsored 100 achievement points. Moon was happy by receiving sponsorship without even turning on the broadcast. Also considering the obsidian tablet's completion rate, and the synthesis which he had to do, Moon thanked Zeus for the sponsorship, while astrophy dematerialized, and even when Moon was disappointed, he knew that he was still not powerful enough to permanently materialize the weapon. But he was still happy, because he learned this fact cheaply, as he completely decimated the whole goblin tribe by attacking them. As Moon and Kim were going to the next area, the brat turned around and noticed that the target point has appeared behind them, and that they should leave now for completing the mission. But Moon just smiled and told Kim to go first, because he still had some things to take care of. Kim was shocked, wondering about what was left for Moon to do, because the goblins were regrouping and heading back in. But Moon told the boy that he will be just fine and finish everything he started and then join Kim. Even when the boy wanted to say something more, Moon turned around and started going towards even more goblins. Kim just shouted at Moon, telling him to visit his guild next time, so that his guild can repay for his kindness. Kim started going out of the stronghold while thanking Moon multiple times. That the goblins, on the other hand, were completely shocked, wondering about how they would deal with such a terrifying monster in the form of a human. Moon just smiled while stretching himself and asking the goblins if they should wrap the things that they have started. That suddenly a huge AX started attacking the bow, and just in the nick of time, Moon was able to evade such a powerful groundbreaking attack. The goblins started laughing while they were overjoyed, because their boss had finally arrived and now the human was a dead man. A crimson silhouette of a large goblin was visible to Moon, and he was a bit terrified, knowing that it would be difficult, with the huge weapon hanging from his huge hands, which was full of dry blood. The goblin was smiling at the look of the human, while Moon was shocked because in front of him was a hobgoblin. He wondered about why a hobgoblin was present in front of him. At first, it was not believable for him that such a powerful monster appeared, but then he realized that hobgoblins were monsters that emerge when elite goblins are influenced by dark energy, and since the infested stronghold overflows with such energy, it was inevitable for one to appear. But still, the arena was supposed to be just a selection match, and even for a high difficulty one, sending a hobgoblin was really an overkill, and it was at least a platinum tier opponent. Moon knew that something was wrong, but he also knew that there was no way for him to resolve this situation without fighting the hobgoblin. He activated the Black Panther skill and started running towards the giant creature, while the goblin started swinging his weapon recklessly. Trying to avenge his subordinates, Moon was able to somehow dodge the attack, while realizing the sheer strength possessed by the hobgoblin. But Moon was faster than the creature, dodging every single attack before the hobgoblin can do anything. But still, as he was effortlessly dodging all the creature's attacks, Moon wondered about why this high-level creature was too easy for him. He knew that overall, its physical capabilities were lower than a real hobgoblin. Moon smiled, realizing that the goblin was nerfed because it was just a selection program. Moon thought that maybe using the achievement points would be a waste, but he still needed to take down the creature properly, and for that, he was ready to use the power of the Philosopher's Stone and to summon astrophy. Once again, the stone told Moon in a cheerful, girly voice that it was ready for the synthesis. But just then a notification popped up, telling Moon that Black Goat was frowning at the continuous lightning strikes, and he was dissatisfied by Moon not using the obsidian tablet. Instead, the woe was distracted for a moment, wondering about what was going on, for all of a sudden, that this opportunity was grabbed by the hobgoblin as the creature slammed his weapon onto the ground, clashing with Moon. And before the boy can realize it, it was too late. Due to all these skills and synthesis protection, Moon was able to protect himself while he realized that he can't just get distracted in front of a hobgoblin. Even if it was nerfed, But the gods were not ready to listen, as Black Goat issued a mission for our bow, telling him to defeat the hobgoblin boss using only human synthesis and not Zeus lightning. And for that, the Black Goat was ready to reward Moon with 500 achievement points. As the scene shifts, we see that the goblin was roaring at the human, while he kept on dodging him, as he wondered about why the Black Goat was offering 500 achievement points for just this kind of mission. After a bit of thought, Moon realized that it was not about the points, but instead about his pride, especially since the boy was an alchemist instead of a magic user. Moon looked at the sky, telling the Black Goat that he will take on the mission, but hearing that, Zeus was frowning in displeasure, and both the gods started fighting with one another. After a long and abusive conversation, Zeus was ready to back down and takes a step back, while Moon was not able to understand about why they were both changing the colors of the sky. That the hobgoblin, who had been paused for all these moments, suddenly started screaming as he thought that Moon was mocking him by looking at the sky. He wondered if he was not strong enough, and started charging towards the bull. On the other hand, Moon just smiled, realizing that he will have to defeat the hobgoblin by only using human synthesis, knowing that it was not impossible for him. Moon turned around towards the creature and started running at him with insane speeds, while even the goblins started smiling, realizing that this was going to be fun. Moon activated the ogre's tissue and slammed his punch straight onto the goblin's shield, breaking it with just one heavy impact. The goblin was surprised by this much power showed by a human, thinking that Moon surely had some nerves to face the hobgoblin head-on. The creature grabbed Moon's head and pulled him up near his head level. He ordered all the other goblins to look at what he was doing. The subordinate goblins were all laughing as they got ready with their bamboo sticks, thinking that the human was really caught and they will get to eat meat once again in the same day. These filthy creatures started attacking Moon with their poison needles, piercing and wounding the whole back of the bow, while the hobgoblin laughed, asking Moon if it was hard to move for him. He told Moon that humans were really inferior beings who were just dumb. A green aura started surrounding Moon, while the goblin thought that the human was so pathetic that he fell for such a simple trick and did not even have resistance to paralyzing poison. The goblin decided to start by cutting off Moon's limbs for his subordinates to cook first. That as soon as the creature readied his huge axe to do so, Moon stopped him by grabbing one of his hands with all his strength. Even the creature was surprised, suddenly sensing resistance from the bull, realizing that this strength was too much for him to handle. Moon used the ogre's tissue once again and broke the arm of the goblin completely, tearing it off from his body and throwing it away, while the goblin boss was screaming in pain and agony, not able to comprehend about what happened to him. Moon copied the same dialogue that was spoken by the creature and told a hobgoblin that he and his subordinates were really inferior creatures in front of human like our boy because they fell for such a simple trick, thinking that the human was not resisting. Moon was gleaming with a green aura inside his eyes, while the goblin realized that he was really going to hell after the confrontation with such a monster as a human. The hobgoblin was making a desperate face at his last moments, while, without wasting any more time, Moon immediately snapped his finger and blows the head of the hobgoblin away, shocking all the goblins who were standing near their boss. Now, all the goblins were starting to shake. They were not able to believe that just a few moments ago, their boss was alive and they were going to prepare for eating some fresh human meat, but now their boss was dead by the same human they thought to cook. We see Moon's hand, which was engulfed in blood, but suddenly a notification popped up telling him that he had completed the mission of the Black Goat and had earned 500 achievement points. The Black Goat was greatly satisfied with the use of human synthesis, and Moon had gained additional 500 achievement points, along with defeating the hidden boss hobgoblin without any help. And for that, Moon had received another 500 achievement points. Moon realized that the creature he had defeated was actually a hidden boss, and he can go out without defeating him if he wanted to. That the Galaxy Arena was discussing about Moon, as they were getting astonished by his achievements. Moon remembered that when he created the obsidian tablet, there was something similar like this happening in the arena. He wondered if the attention of the arena was a good thing for him, and decided to think about it positively, because the arena always ensured a clear balance between risk and reward. Moon knew that even if he thought about it a lot, there was nothing that he can do about it now, and he can just go and claim his reward for completing the mission. As the scene shifts, we see that Moon was at home, collecting the rewards he had earned after completing his mission at the goblin's corrupted stronghold. He checked his notifications, confirming that he had successfully defeated all the enemies alone. Because of this, his achievement points increased significantly. He had also advanced to level 4, raised the Philosopher's Stone to level 2, and received a Hobgoblin's battle axe along with a corrupted Hobgoblin serum. The amount of rewards surprised him. More notifications followed, informing him that he had also defeated a hidden boss, granting him an extra 1,000 achievement points. Moon wondered if this was because the Hobgoblin was the first boss. But even then, the reward seemed very generous. He opened his status screen and saw his current achievement points. If he continued at this pace, he would soon reach 10,000 points. Curious, he asked the Philosopher's Stone if he could craft another obsidian tablet once he reached 10,000 points. The stone confirmed that he could, but as he advanced further, he would need more points for future crafting. Moon understood, but the Philosopher's Stone found it strange that he didn't ask why. When the stone pointed this out, Moon explained that he had practiced alchemy for many years, so he already understood the reasoning behind it. Moon then focused on reviewing his status. He realized that as he progressed, the cost of advancement would increase, so he needed to invest his points wisely. However, he also knew he couldn't stop investing because the obsidian tablet worked differently from the stratosphere, which constantly consumed points. Unlike the spear, the obsidian tablet was a permanent tool that he could use at any time after crafting it. Remembering how powerful his human transformation was when he fought the Hobgoblin, he confirmed that the obsidian tablet was worth the investment. The Philosopher's Stone informed him that crafting the second tablet would require 10,000 points, but would increase its power by 20%. Moon was pleased to hear this, as it meant his human transformation ability would double in strength, reaching 40% power. However, he decided to keep some points in reserve, since they were his most valuable resource. Despite all his rewards, he noticed that he had not earned any points from the arena. In the past, he had gained points whenever he streamed or cleared monster-infested areas. Right now, his main focus was determining his rank through the exams he was taking. He checked his progress and saw that his alchemy level had reached 17, while the Philosopher's Stone had leveled up from 5 to 7. Feeling excited, he decided to evaluate his rewards. He looked at the items he had received, including the Goblin Serum and the Hobgoblin's battle axe. The axe was ranked Grade B, increasing attack power by 10%, causing paralysis to its target, and was highly valuable in the market. Amazed Moon noted that these rewards were at the Platinum rank level and even stronger than some top-tier weapons, which only provided a strength boost of +5. Looking at the displayed rewards, he remarked that it had been a long time since he had seen such valuable items, especially after his return. At that moment, the Philosopher's Stone asked him what he meant by after his return. Instead of answering directly, Moon reached for the Goblin Serum, stating that this was what he had been talking about. It was revealed that the serum contained a large amount of dark energy, making it highly toxic. Realizing this, the Philosopher's Stone was shocked and asked if Moon had actually consumed this poison as a remedy before synthesizing it. Moon then remembered the time when he had struggled with his inability to use mana during the official rounds in the arena. His body had started deteriorating, causing unbearable pain. To endure it, he had relied on doses of a special anesthetic, with the Goblin Serum being the main ingredient used to create it. The Philosopher's Stone reminded him that he had successfully created an elixir at that time, so he questioned why he hadn't taken it before. Things became so difficult. Looking at a picture of himself with his brother, Moon hesitated and simply said that it was complicated and not easy to explain. The Philosopher's Stone, however, told him that no matter what his reasons were, he needed to take care of himself before anything else. Despite this, the stone thanked Moon for his efforts, because thanks to him, it had been perfectly crafted. Moon admitted that this was true. If he had not used the elixir to create the Philosopher's Stone, traveling back in time would have been impossible. The stone then revealed something surprising. Even the powerful constellation gods could not travel through time. This made Moon curious, so he asked why he had been healed and brought back. The Philosopher's Stone explained that only one specific being had such an ability. When Moon asked about this being, the stone refused to answer, saying that even the constellations feared mentioning its name. Feeling tired, Moon yawned and decided that if this knowledge was forbidden, there was no point in pressing further. The stone was surprised by how easily he gave up, but Moon simply stated that there was no use discussing something he could not change. The Philosopher's Stone acknowledged his reasoning, especially since the arena was terrified at his presence. It then informed him that they had been sending messages urging it not to communicate with Moon. Changing the subject, the stone asked what he planned to do with the goblin serum now that he could use mana. Moon replied that he no longer needed it as a treatment, so he was considering using it to craft an elixir. The stone was shocked. "You're really going to make an elixir out of poison?" it asked. Moon explained that in alchemy, poison could also become a cure if used correctly. The Philosopher's Stone suddenly became excited about the idea of transforming poison into a healing remedy. Amused, Moon told it to calm down. The next day, Moon stood on the street, in front of a massive shopping center, looking at it. He realized that nothing had changed from what he remembered. The Philosopher's Stone commented on the towering structure, asking if this was the place known as the Sanctuary of Players. Moon confirmed this, explaining that its official name was Galaxy Agora. The stone then asked if the arena had built the place, but Moon clarified that while the arena managed the broadcasts, they did not construct the building. As Moon approached the entrance, a staff member greeted him and asked if he wasn't awakened. She smiled and handed him a small item, instructing him to place it in his inventory and then return it for verification. Moon followed the instructions and she confirmed that everything was in order. She then gave him a device called the Player's Watch. As he held it, Moon thought about how long it had been since he last owned one. The watch stored records of everything related to him, contained maps of the Agora, and was equipped with many useful functions. As he stepped inside, the staff member asked if this was his first time visiting Galaxy Agora. Moon shook his head, saying that he had been here before. He then walked further inside, while the Philosopher's Stone marveled at the crowd, asking if all these people were players. Moon explained that only awakened individuals who could access their inventory were allowed inside, meaning everyone present was indeed a player. The stone then understood why this place was called the Sanctuary of Players, and asked where they were headed. Moon replied that they were going to a player-only shopping district. Inside an elevator, Moon overheard two passengers talking. One asked his companion if he had heard about the latest graduating class from the academy. The other replied that this class was being called the best ever. He added that Sihuk and Lee Young were the most outstanding among them. His companion confirmed that both had already reached time and rank and had become top-tier players, making them the strongest in the country. As the elevator reached the 4th floor, Moon stepped out with a small smile on his face. He could still hear one of the passengers complaining about being stuck in gold rank for 4 years. The Philosopher's Stone asked why he was smiling, and Moon replied that he simply found their conversation amusing. The Philosopher's Stone then looked around in amazement at the many shops, asking if all these people were here to buy and sell ores. Moon explained that the marketplace included guild shops, as well as many independent vendors. The stone then asked why Moon had chosen to come here instead of selling his items at an auction house. Moon explained that regular equipment at this level had a fairly stable market price, making auctions less effective. Selling directly to vendors was often easier and faster. Moon arrived at the Seongsam Guild store knowing that dealing with major guilds was usually more efficient. As he stepped inside, he was warmly greeted by an employee browsing through the items. He was surprised at how well organized and clean everything was. Unlike other stores, where items were often randomly displayed, this place maintained a high level of professionalism. After a short while, the shopkeeper asked if he was searching for something specific. Moon shook his head and explained that he wasn't there to buy anything, but he wanted to sell. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow in surprise, commenting that very few people came to sell items these days, and asked Moon to show him what he had brought. Moon pulled out the hobgoblin's battle axe, placing it on the counter. The shopkeeper's eyes widened in shock as he stared at the weapon. Carefully picking it up and examining every detail, he was wondering if it was really what he thought it was. Moon asked if they could complete the transaction immediately. The shopkeeper assured him it was possible, and quickly checked the latest market prices. When he revealed the amount, Moon was stunned. 42 million won. He could hardly believe it. Seeing Moon's reaction, the shopkeeper explained that just the day before, they had purchased a similar axe, but with slightly lower stats, for 38 million won. He then casually asked how Moon had come across such a rare weapon. Continuing, he mentioned that he was a production class player and could tell Moon wasn't part of the high-ranking players. The shopkeeper directly asked about Moon's level, and when Moon replied that he was only at level 7, The shopkeeper's expression changed. He assumed Moon would want the money in cash rather than transferring it to his arena account. At that moment, Moon realized the shopkeeper suspected him of stealing the axe. Quickly clarifying, he explained that he had won the axe in an arena battle. However, the shopkeeper didn't believe him and smirked sarcastically, questioning if a level 7 player could truly obtain such a rare weapon, something that was normally found only in the platinum ranks. The shopkeeper placed his hand near the alarm button, warning Moon that if he pressed it, the security team would come and verify the real owner of the axe. Sighing, he said that he understood people like Moon often had difficult circumstances, which was why he was willing to help. He then made an offer to buy the axe for just 10 million won, adding that Moon should take the deal unless he wanted trouble. He also assured him that he would never mention this situation to anyone. Moon was unsure whether the shopkeeper was outright trying to scam him, or if he truly believed he had stolen the axe. Before Moon could say anything, another voice interrupted, commenting on how interesting the conversation was. Both Moon and the shopkeeper turned to see a new person entering the store. The shopkeeper's face turned pale with fear, as the newcomer was Liu Jian, who casually observed the situation before commenting that the shopkeeper had grown bold ever since being put in charge of the branch. The scene then shifts to outside the shopping center, where Moon and Liu were walking together having left the store. Liu cracks open a can of soda and hands it to Moon. As Moon looks at her hands, a strange expression appears on his face. 9 years from now, those same hands would be gripping a massive hammer covered in blood. The very hammer she used to shatter his grandfather's skull. Chairman Li Chiel. The memory was horrifying. And it wasn't just Chairman Li Chiel. That day, she had taken down several high-ranking officials, and that event had marked the beginning of the country's complete downfall in his previous life. The question of why she had done it still haunted him. The shock of that moment had never left his mind. On that day, it felt as though Liu had transformed into a completely different person, nothing like the one he had once known. Her voice snapped him out of his thoughts as she asked if he still liked soda, or if his taste had changed. Moon blinked and quickly replied that he was just lost in thought for a moment. She chuckled, commenting that he hadn't changed at all, and that when he focused on something, he completely blocked out everything around him. When he questioned if that was really the case, she laughed and confirmed it, adding that because of him, she had only ever admired men who were passionate about what they did. Moon took a sip of the soda and glanced at her, commenting that she hadn't changed either. At that moment, another woman approached Liu and informed her that she had sent the details of the deposit she requested earlier. Liu checks the deposit and asks if everything was done as instructed. The employee confirms it, and Liu thanks them before telling Moon that the deposit is his payment for the battle axe. Moon is surprised to see the amount, 50 million won, much more than he expected. Liu explains that the extra money is to make up for how her employee treated him. She even considered giving him more, but stops herself. Moon, not wanting her to mix personal matters with business, tells her that the amount is already generous. Liu looks at him with admiration, saying that he hasn't changed, which is why she finds it easy to talk to him. Moon feels a bit uneasy, wondering why she is looking at him like that. He assumes it's because they haven't seen each other in a long time. As they prepare to leave, Moon asks about his aunt's condition. Liu tells him she is doing fine, but hasn't regained consciousness yet. However, she assures him that she is taking good care of her. Moon hopes his aunt's condition isn't worsening because of Liu's constant focus on the arena. Liu admits that she uses visits to the hospital as an excuse to be more involved with the arena. She even installed a personal device in her mother's room to monitor everything while she's away. She then asks about an item Moon claimed to have obtained. He confirms it, and she asks if he is feeling better now. Moon reassures her that he has fully recovered from Manhwa disease. Liu is overjoyed, but also apologizes for overreacting. Still, she congratulates him. After a brief pause, she hesitantly asks how he recovered, if he doesn't mind sharing. Moon remained silent for a moment before replying that it was just luck. One day, he simply started feeling his mana return and it gradually restored itself. Liu is amazed and relieved knowing that mana depletion had no known cure. She had been deeply worried about him. Moon thanks her, telling her not to blame herself anymore. He adds that what happened in the past was just an accident, and that he only did what he had to do at the time. But when Liu continues talking about it, Moon stops her, repeating that it was his choice. He even says that if he could go back in time, he wouldn't change anything. However, deep down he feels bitter. He keeps telling himself he has no regrets, but if that were true, why has he never replied to his siblings' messages since that day? He reflects on how outside pressures affected his emotions. Being the son of a woman outside the main family made him an outcast. After he became disabled from the incident, his family wanted nothing to do with him. Still cutting ties with his siblings, the ones he had grown up with, was his own decision. They had tried reaching out many times, but he ignored them after leaving the family. Thinking about what he had done to them, he feels ashamed. If he had to justify his actions, he would say that he simply couldn't accept the reality of his condition. He had once dreamed of a bright future, starting with 10 points in magic, but losing everything in one moment shattered that dream. That's why he cut himself off from the world. Both physically and mentally, he had barely been holding on. Then a thought crosses his mind. Perhaps deep down, he had also been resentful of Liu. Moon had always regretted the person he used to be, especially when it came to Liu. If he had stayed by her side, maybe she wouldn't have died branded a traitor in his previous life. The weight of that regret had never left him, and seeing her alive again in this light made it even more difficult to suppress those feelings. Liu suddenly interrupted his thoughts, asking if he had participated in the arena matches. Yet, Moon, shaking off his memories, replied that he was still finishing his placement matches. Liu insisted that he needed proper equipment and suggested they go buy it together. However, Moon told her there was no rush, much to her surprise. She couldn't understand how he could remain so calm when preparation was crucial for success in the arena. She then asked if he was in the magic category. He confirmed, explaining that he was an alchemist. Liu immediately understood, then asked if he planned to use his money to buy both equipment and alchemical components. Moon replied in agreement. Liu was pleased, because she also needed to buy some components. Moon, curious, asked why she needed them, reminding her that she was a combat class player. She playfully hit him, telling him that alchemists weren't the only ones who used components. She also made her own training tools. Moon raised an eyebrow, questioning whether it wouldn't be better to let specialists handle that, especially since she had access to any elixir she wanted. But Liu didn't let him argue further. She grabbed his arm and insisted they go immediately, since she had to visit her mother later. Moon sighed, asking her to let go for just a second, but she pulled him along forcefully, leaving him no choice but to follow. As this happened, the woman who had processed the money deposit earlier watched them from a distance. She could hardly believe this was the same Liu she knew from the company. At work, Liu was always composed, serious and efficient. Seeing her laughing and moving freely, she wondered if this was her true personality. She realized she had never truly understood her at all. The scene then shifted to the marketplace. Vendors loudly advertised their goods, calling out to customers. The streets were bustling with players and merchants alike, each engaged in their own business. Moon felt relieved thinking they were finally done shopping. However, Liu still wanted to buy more. Those who recognized her started whispering among themselves, curious about the young man accompanying her. Moon tried to convince Liu that he had already bought more than he originally planned, but she insisted he buy one last thing. She promised it would be the final purchase. Moon protested that his inventory was full, leaving no space for more items. However, Liu pleaded with him, saying there was something specific. She wanted to give him something essential. Moon sighed, realizing how exhausting it was to shop for components with someone else. He watched as Liu carefully examined each item, inspecting their quality and rank. Even as a player, she had an incredible eye for rank differences. He was impressed by her attention to detail, which reminded him that she had always been meticulous in everything she did. He wondered how she knew so much about alchemy for Moon, someone who crafted the Philosopher's Stone and legendary grade equipment. Minor details didn't matter. Only whether an item was of the right rank. Everything else was secondary. Finally, after much searching, Liu handed something to Moon. It was an arena access device. Moon's eyes widened in excitement. He asked if this was really the VR device used in arena matches. Liu confirmed, explaining that it was the latest model by Sung Sem and hadn't even been released to the public yet. Moon examined the device closely, realizing just how valuable it was. Access devices came in various forms: helmets or visors or even capsules, each designed for specific functions. Arena had collaborated with governments worldwide to create new equipment. Initially, powerful nations like the USA and China dominated the production of these tools. However, Arena wanted to prevent monopolization, warning of its dangers and encouraging fair participation among all nations. Moon reflected on how the goal was to give everyone a chance to contribute to technological development, with authorities even announcing that they would revoke the qualifications of all players from China and America. Looking at Liu hesitated before voicing his concern about whether it was really okay for her to give him something like this. She reassured him with a smile, explaining that the best players in Seomsam, including herself, were already using it, though it hadn't been released commercially yet. Still uncertain, he questioned whether it was truly fine for him to have it despite not being part of her company. She simply shrugged, dismissing his worries by stating that, since she was the one giving it to him, there was no issue. If anyone had concerns about the visor, they could come to her. As they continued walking, he wondered aloud whether it wouldn't be better for him to just buy something suitable from the Seomsam store instead. Liu frowned, clearly frustrated, pointing out that he could get seriously injured running around the arena without a proper device like the one she was offering. Realizing his stubbornness, she worried he might insist on refusing. So she quickly added that he could consider it compensation for the way the store manager had mistreated him earlier. That reasoning finally made him relent, as long as it counted that way he thought it worked for him. He actually needed a good device, especially since he was considering live streaming his matches in the arena. Glancing at the time, he realized he was running late, and mentioned that he should get going. Liu acknowledged this, mentioning that she needed to visit her mother at the hospital as well. His thoughts drifted to his aunt, who was also hospitalized due to an illness linked to the arena. He made a mental note to visit her later. When the Galaxy Arena first opened, a strange illness called arena disease had begun affecting those who were awakened. He wondered about his aunt's exact condition, but knew that as someone chosen by the constellations, she should be able to endure for some time. She had always treated him like her own son, despite his illegitimate status, and the thought strengthened his resolve he needed to improve quickly and find a cure for her illness. Just as he was about to leave, Liu suddenly grabbed his sleeve, insisting that he should reply to her as well. Momentarily confused, he realized she was talking about messages. She complained that Sihuk had kept teasing her because Moon had messaged him first. He chuckled, wondering if Sihuk really had nothing better to do than provoke her. She huffed in frustration, insisting that he did it all the time and that it was incredibly annoying. Despite how they were no longer children, he assured her that he would send her a message when he arrived. Her face brightened instantly, her excitement unmistakable. Touched by her attachment and eagerness, he reached out and gently patted her head. The moment his hand made contact, her expression changed and he panicked. Had he made a mistake? Did girls hate having their hairstyles touched? He quickly withdrew his hand, deciding it was best to leave before he made things worse. Hastily, he told her to take care of herself and walked away. Liu remained frozen in place, her assistant watching in horror, finding the act incredibly rude. No matter how close they were, it seemed inappropriate to touch her hair like that. But as she stepped closer, she noticed that Liu had not moved, reassuring her that she would fix her hair immediately. She hesitated, not wanting to draw attention to them, especially in a crowded marketplace full of players. The last thing they needed was rumors spreading. Finally, Liu seemed to recover, turning to her assistant and pleading for her to pretend that nothing had happened. The assistant forced a smile, agreeing to forget about it, though deep down, she was still processing what she had just witnessed. Taking a deep breath, Liu composed herself and shifted the conversation back to business, prompting her assistant about the matter she had mentioned earlier. With a nod, the assistant confirmed that she was referring to the incident from 10 years ago, and admitted that she still hadn't been able to find any new information about it. Liu found it strange that no evidence had surfaced despite their search, turning to her assistant with a growing suspicion that the entire situation had been deliberately suppressed. The assistant hesitated before confirming that someone had erased all traces of the incident, a deliberate cover-up of an attack on highly positioned figures in the country. You nodded, her thoughts wandering to the eerie media silence surrounding the event. Just recently, the heir of a major group had made a careless joke during a live broadcast, and since then, the media had been relentless in their coverage. Yet when it came to an incident of this magnitude, there was nothing but silence. The contrast was too great to ignore. She considered how absurd it was that a mere third-generation heir to a wealthy family could dominate headlines, while something far more serious had been entirely buried. It all pointed to one thing: someone with significant influence was ensuring the attack remained a secret. The assistant agreed, stating that this was exactly what she had been trying to convey, and warning that their continued investigation could put them in danger. Liu met her gaze with unwavering determination and asked if she was afraid. Instead of answering directly, the assistant countered with a question of her own, wondering how Liu could even think such a thing. Her concern wasn't for herself, but for Liu, who had much more to lose. Yu, however, merely smiled, stating that she no longer had anything left to lose. That as her eyes followed Moon walking away in the distance, something shifted within her that wasn't entirely true anymore. Now, for the first time in a long while, she had something. That was precisely why she needed to uncover the truth. The assistant asked again if they should begin the investigation immediately, warning that once they took the first step, there would be no turning back. Liu's response was immediate. She wanted it started at once. Any piece of evidence, any person involved in the cover-up had to be brought to her without delay, and if necessary, she would accept their heads instead. Recently, she had come across a very interesting item. Meanwhile, Moon returned home and collapsed onto his bed with a content sigh, mumbling about how home was the best place in the world. But his moment of relaxation was short-lived, as the Philosopher Stone spoke up, asking about the girl he had been with. Moon, already half asleep, responded that if it was referring to Liu, they had known each other since they were 5 years old, though they hadn't seen each other much in recent years. He then asked why the stone was so interested in her. The stone mused that she seemed different from how she presented herself to the world. There was something about her that didn't quite align with her outward persona, but since they were childhood friends, it wouldn't interfere. Instead, it decided to keep an eye on her, ensuring Moon's safety if necessary. However, it chose not to reveal its suspicions to him just yet. Instead, it nudged him to get up and start making the potion, promising to assist him in the process. This particular potion, it claimed, would make him stronger. Moon, now fully awake, felt a rush of excitement and immediately began preparing. He needed the right workspace, so with a simple snap of his fingers, he used his crafting abilities to conjure a customized desk for his experiments. Taking a step back, he admired his handiwork, remarking on how incredible alchemy was. It always provided him with exactly what he needed in the best possible form. He then methodically arranged his ingredients on one side and the potions he would later use on the other. The Philosopher's Stone, observing his preparations, inquired about the specific purpose of the potion. Moon admitted that while he usually focused on enhancing materials, this time, he wanted to try something different. Holding a vial of goblin serum in his hand, he explained that this particular serum induced paralysis. The stone immediately recognized the substance, explaining that goblins produced paralysis poison from their own blood. However, it had to be purified of its demonic energy before it could be used effectively. Curious, the stone then asked if Moon intended to enhance the corrupting effects of the serum. Moon confirmed, revealing that he planned to focus on its corruption properties rather than any stat increases. The Philosopher's Stone reacted with alarm, declaring that he had completely lost his mind. Experimenting with goblin magic was dangerous. It was unstable, unpredictable, and Moon was neither a demon nor someone proficient in even basic dark magic. The risk was immense. His body could be destroyed in an instant if he made even a small mistake. Moon, however, remained unfazed, reassuring the stone that he was fully aware of the dangers. The stone pressed further, warning that carelessness could result in permanent damage, possibly rendering him unable to use magic ever again. But Moon dismissed its concerns, explaining that he had a plan and knew someone who was highly skilled in magic who could assist him, if necessary. With that, he declared that it was time to begin the experiment. At first, Moon told the whole plan to the stone, and then turned to it for its opinion. The stone, after a long pause, admitted that Moon was incredibly efficient and had a remarkable mind for alchemy. Moon smirked, acknowledging his own intelligence, but also taking a moment to compliment the stone's quick comprehension of his process. He ran his fingers along the Philosopher's Stone, considering whether the outcome he envisioned was truly within reach. The stone assured him that it was entirely possible, and as long as he followed the plan meticulously, there should be no unforeseen complications. It compared his ambition to the creation of the obsidian tablet, emphasizing that such artifacts did not simply grant power, but were constructed through precise effort and a high cost. The Philosopher's Stone then warned him that the final stage of the formula would demand a far greater price than he had yet encountered. He asked if that meant an extraordinary number of achievement points would be necessary. The stone confirmed this, explaining that unless his alchemy level advanced significantly, the cost would remain immense. Understanding the stakes, he acknowledged that what he sought to create rivaled the worth of legendary artifacts. The realization settled within him. What he aimed for exceeded human comprehension, even for the most skilled alchemists. Even if he were to elevate his rank and expertise, the task at hand was impossible under normal circumstances. The thought made sense to him. Legendary gray elements were gifts from the constellations granted only to a select few under specific conditions. He asked the Philosopher's Stone to calculate the exact number of achievement points required to bring the formula to life. After a brief pause, the stone explained that the total depended on the completion rate he wished to achieve it, then remarked on their fortune in possessing the obsidian tablet, a key factor in their success. Curious, Moon questioned why the tablet was such an advantage. The stone explained that being an alchemist alone granted him additional points, but beyond that, the Philosopher's Stone itself carried unique magic that altered the equation entirely. Moon considered the stone's words before teasing it, asking if its unique magic referred to its special properties. The stone responded in mock irritation, pointing out that he had yet to say anything complimentary about it. Laughing, he told the stone that it was both magical and beautiful. Flustered, the stone told him not to say such embarrassing things. He shifted his focus back to the completion rate, recognizing that the cost could be lowered if he accepted a reduced percentage. However, this approach, while viable for crafting items like the astrophy, was a dangerous gamble when it came to knowledge. Information, no matter how valuable, was useless if obtained in fragments. His thoughts returned to the integration of the Philosopher's Stone with the obsidian tablet. He asked whether the stone could truly absorb knowledge. The stone answered with certainty, explaining that the tablet had already been absorbed within it. No matter how remarkable an artifact was, it was ultimately just another component of alchemy. He smiled, asking if this ability extended to the direct absorption of knowledge itself. The stone assured him that it could, before sarcastically declaring itself to be a very clever woman. Amused, Moon agreed that this was an incredible ability and decided it was time to begin crafting. The Philosopher's Stone asked what completion rate he desired, and he responded that 10% would be sufficient. The stone approved of his reasoning, acknowledging that it was a practical decision. It then asked if he understood the execution process. He admitted that he had some knowledge, and recalled a moment from his past life. Maki had once approached him holding a book in her hands, asking if he could decipher it. She had known he was the smartest among them, and had trusted his analytical abilities. The book had detailed the 10th level of the heavenly demon martial arts, while she herself had only reached the 7th level. Back then, he had been unable to read the text, since it was restricted to the rightful heir. But he had deduced its structure. The art was divided into 10 levels, each corresponding to 10% completion. He realized that by obtaining just the first level, he would acquire foundational knowledge that could serve as a stepping stone for greater understanding. This same art had propelled Maki into a position of high status, despite never advancing beyond the 7th level. He had always wanted to decipher it himself, but now the Philosopher's Stone's ability to absorb knowledge changed everything. Instead of struggling to analyze each fragment, he only needed to prepare his body, and his human transfiguration ability would handle the rest. With his decision made, he asked the Philosopher's Stone how many achievement points would be necessary. The answer came quickly: 5,000 points for a 10% completion rate. Delighted, he remarked on the bargain. It was an incredibly low price for such an immense gain. The Philosopher's Stone warns Moon that the final part of his endeavor will be the most difficult, as it involves legendary knowledge. Moon remains unfazed, convinced that mastering the first rank will be sufficient for now. Without hesitation, he moves forward, confirming the equivalent exchange. As a notification prompts him to pay 5,000 achievement points, the moment he accepts, a newly transcribed sheet appears before him, identical to the original, containing the heavenly demon art's teachings. A wave of satisfaction washes over him as he has done it. Despite obtaining the knowledge, Moon understands that his full potential remains beyond his grasp. Wasting no time, he instructs the Philosopher's Stone to absorb the text immediately. As it complies, he watches in fascination. This time, there is no reaction from any constellation. Suddenly, an eerie sensation overtakes Moon. His vision blurs, His limbs feel weightless, and an unsettling familiarity settles in. It mirrors the sensation from before his return, before he can make sense of it. Everything fades and he collapses. Time passes. Gradually, awareness trickles back. His surroundings feel foreign. Moon blinks, attempting to gather his thoughts. But suddenly, a voice cuts through the silence. An old man asked Moon if he has finally woken up and if his body is intact. Moon turned sharply to see the old man and wondered about who he was. Moon reassured the old man that he was fine, and asked him not to worry. The elderly man smiled and invited him to sit. Before Moon could even take a step, he suddenly found himself kneeling beside the man, looking back at where he had just been. He hadn't moved yet, he was here. The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. He turned to the old man, eyes widening as he admitted that he had never imagined meeting a constellation face to face like this. The old man chuckled, amused by his words, and remarked that he spoke as if he already knew who he was. Moon, still stunned, explained that he could hardly fail to recognize him, given that the technique he had been studying before arriving here was the heavenly demon art. The old man laughed again, acknowledging that he should not have even asked. Then, with a knowing smile, he confirmed Moon's suspicions. He was indeed the constellation known as the heavenly demon. Just as the words left the old man's mouth, a notification appeared before Moon congratulating him for being the first human to meet a constellation face to face, and rewarding him with 5,000 achievement points. More messages followed, warning that the heavenly demon was an extremely dangerous entity and that the system would take all possible measures to ensure player safety. The system urged him to proceed with caution, avoid provocation, and assured him that he would be immediately summoned back to Earth if any dangerous situation arose. Moon's thoughts raced. If even the system itself was issuing such dire warnings, then the being before, for him, was beyond formidable. The heavenly demon frowned, clearly irritated by the constant alerts, and muttered for the nuisance to stop. Instantly, the notifications vanished. Turning his gaze back to Moon, he inquired if Moon assumed he had been summoned because of the heavenly demon art. Moon hesitated before nodding, asking if that wasn't the case. The old man smirked, admitting that he liked Moon's boldness, but clarified that the art was not the reason. He was interested in something entirely different. Then his gaze turned sharp, and he asked who Moon really was. Moon blinked, confused by the question. When he hesitantly asked what the old man meant, the heavenly demon simply repeated himself. The intensity in his eyes made Moon wonder if he was trying to determine how unique he was. He recalled that even Zeus and the black goat hadn't noticed his regression. Yet, here was the heavenly demon summoning him specifically to ask this question. The thought unsettled him, scoffing. The heavenly demon accused Moon of pretending to be ignorant, implying that he knew more than he let on. Moon exhaled slowly, choosing his words carefully. He stated that he knew the heavenly demon was someone who walked the path of dominance and preferred powerful, dominant beings like those from the demon realm. The old man burst into laughter, declaring that Moon was sharp and that his assessment was entirely accurate. Even before becoming a constellation, the heavenly demon had sought absolute power and dominion. Moon held his gaze, and suddenly a memory surfaced, one from his previous life. He had once met a demon king with the same terrifying presence. The realization made his blood run cold. The power standing before him now was on that same level. As if sensing Moon's thoughts, the heavenly demon's eyes flickered with an unreadable emotion. The world around them shifted, dissolving into darkness. Moon suddenly felt himself sinking, as if being pulled into an endless void. Yet, instead of fear, there was an odd sense of familiarity. The heavenly demon watched him carefully, and remarked that Moon carried traces of something remarkable. It was rare for a human to stand in the void without faltering. Moon remained silent, unsure of how to respond. The old man pressed further, asking if he still intended to feign ignorance. Moon frowned, admitting that he didn't fully understand. If the heavenly demon was referring to something unusual about him, then perhaps it had to do with a title he possessed. Intrigued, the heavenly demon asked what title he meant. Moon explained that one of his titles was the one who caught the attention of a constellation from the other side. For a moment, the old man was silent, then a slow grin spread across his face, before he let out a chuckle that grew into full-blown laughter. He mocked Moon, saying that he used such grand phrases just because a constellation had taken notice of him. Moon, however, detected something in the old man's tone suspicious. He asked if the heavenly demon had encountered them before. The laughter ceased abruptly, and the amusement vanished from the old man's face. Moon had unknowingly provoked the heavenly demon exactly what the system had warned him against. A surge of immense killing intent filled the air, sharp and suffocating. But Moon reminded himself to remain calm. If anything were to happen to him, the black goat would never let it slide. Then unexpectedly, the heavenly demon let out a deep, booming laugh. His amused expression betraying his curiosity, he admitted that he now understood why he found Moon so interesting, remarking that it was no surprise a specific constellation had set its sights on him. A glint of something unreadable flashed in his gaze before he casually revealed that Moon's assumption was correct. He had indeed lost to that constellation in a humiliating defeat. That, he mused, was precisely why he was so curious. He wanted to understand what it was about Moon that had captured that constellation's attention. Before he could react, the old man made another stunning admission. He had spent 1,000 years trying to get that constellation to notice him. Moon's eyes widened in disbelief. Had he really spent a millennium on such a pursuit? The heavenly demon chuckled, shaking his head, acknowledging that Moon, being an ordinary human, would not understand such things. Just as he was about to elaborate, his expression darkened. His words halted mid-sentence, as he seemed to perceive something Moon could not. A deep scowl settled on his face, his irritation evident. The silence stretched unbearably, until with sudden fury, he shouted at an unseen presence. Moon stood frozen, unable to hear what the old man was responding to, but guessing that the system was interfering, urging the constellation to stop and let him go. After a moment, the old man sighed, his expression settling into reluctant acceptance. Their meeting had to end. Then with a smirk, he addressed Moon as his disciple. Moon hesitated at the word, unsure of its implications. A heavenly demon merely shrugged, pointing out that since Moon had been studying the heavenly demon art, it naturally made him his disciple. Before Moon could protest, the old man cut him off, assuring him that he didn't mind in the slightest. In fact, he welcomed it, finding it an honor that someone who had drawn the attention of that constellation was continuing his legacy. However, there was one catch. Moon was not officially his disciple, and the heavenly demon had a request. A system notification appeared before Moon confirming the words. His task was to find a talented individual worthy of the heavenly demon's sponsorship. If he succeeded, he would receive the heavenly demon art level 2 and 5,000 achievement points. With a smirk, the old man added that he had even worded the request in the system style just for him. Moon considered the mission, his mind immediately going to Maki. However, uncertainty gnawed at him. What would happen if he failed? Would it impact her future irreversibly? The heavenly demon, sensing his hesitation, assured him that he trusted Moon's judgment, adding that being under the watchful eye of that constellation was proof of his potential. But there were conditions. The first was that the chosen person had to be a girl. Moon frowned, confused by the specificity. The old man continued without pause. She had to be young, exceptionally beautiful, bold, and possessing a strong personality. The heavenly demon art required aggressiveness. After all, Moon barely managed to interject before the constellation carried on, declaring that she must also have long legs, a striking face, and with an exaggerated pause, a large chest. Moon could only stare in stunned silence, barely able to process the absurdity of the criteria. None of this had anything to do with the legacy, he argued, but the heavenly demon simply grinned, insisting these were the qualities of a true successor. It finally clicked. This was why Maki had spent so much time cursing the old man. Before Moon could respond, the scene abruptly shifted. A sharp force yanked him from that place, and in an instant, he found himself back home. Momentarily disoriented, a frantic voice immediately snapped him back to reality. The philosopher's stone was screaming, demanding to know what had happened and why he had suddenly lost consciousness. Moon blinked, surprised to realize that he had, in fact, blacked out. Taking a steadying breath, he admitted that he had met one of the constellations. The philosopher's stone's energy pulsed erratically before it hesitantly inquired if that being had been the heavenly demon. Moon was startled by the philosopher's stone's knowledge, and asked how she knew. She replied matter-of-factly that it was only natural, given the heavenly demon's infamous reputation for violence. Concerned, she inquired whether the heavenly demon had harassed or attacked him, explaining that very few survived an encounter with such a being. But Moon quickly reassured her that he was fine and that nothing had happened. The philosopher's stone sighed, remarking on how lucky Moon was to have returned unharmed. She explained that the heavenly demon was far from normal, and it was fortunate that he let Moon go so easily, though there must have been a reason for it. She then asked if the heavenly demon had been angered by Moon learning the heavenly demon art. When Moon revealed that he had not been angry at all, but instead had allowed him to learn it, the stone seemed surprised. She then suggested that they begin preparing the potion now that Moon had acquired the energy of the heavenly demon art. Moon got up and began executing the steps. As he worked the Philosopher's Stone, asked if he needed guidance regarding the order of the steps and ingredients. But Moon declined, his confidence unwavering. Then, almost as if hearing something others couldn't, the stone asked if he could hear the sound. The faint, eerie cries of the poison being removed from the serum, as if it were resisting its fate. She mocked the serum, amused by how quickly its poison was being stripped away, even when she had expected more resistance. Moon found her comments strange, but focused on his task. Finally, he announced that the potion was complete. The Philosopher's Stone was surprised to see that it was not in liquid form, but had instead taken the shape of a pill. Moon explained that he had lacked the courage to drink such a powerful potion, so he had altered its composition. The stone admitted that his reasoning made sense, especially since they had infused the potion with demonic energy. Examining the elixir, Moon was pleased with the result, even though he had created it himself. It was truly remarkable. It had been a long time since he had last crafted something of this level, and he had been uncertain about his ability. He had not expected to be able to create an elixir that could permanently enhance one's stats. The Philosopher's Stone informed him that the elixir was ranked as C due to the low quality of the ingredients. Still, its potential was incredible, which was to be expected, given that Moon had made it. She added that while the elixir might not allow him to acquire demonic energy, the outcome was not guaranteed. Moon acknowledged that this might be true for ordinary people, but he had an advantage. The first star technique of the heavenly demon art was fully embedded within the stone. If he used it properly when consuming the pill, it would be fine. The Philosopher's Stone agreed, placing her trust in him. With that, Moon swallowed the pill. Almost instantly, notifications flooded his vision, informing him that his strength, agility, and health had all increased by 2 levels. Before he could fully grasp the changes, he suddenly found himself in another place. Looking around, he searched for something specific. When he finally spotted it, a strange, flickering entity, he exclaimed in urgency. It was about to disappear. A purple, ominous-looking flame shimmered in the distance. Without hesitation, Moon called out to the Philosopher's Stone, insisting that she could not allow it to vanish. The stone approached the entity. Fully aware of its importance, she reassured Moon that she would not let it escape, and swiftly absorbed it into herself. At that moment, the truth became clear. The flame was demonic energy. Moon sighed in relief, knowing that they had captured it just in time. This energy was notorious for vanishing quickly, making it nearly impossible to locate again afterward. Deciding on their next step, Moon suggested that they should first establish an energy core known as the Danshan before proceeding with the great heavenly technique. But before he could continue, the Philosopher's Stone interrupted with an unusual question. Was it truly necessary for the Danshan to be located below the belly button? Did they even need a Danshan at all? Moon hesitated, admitting that he had never considered this before. The stone explained her reasoning. The Danshan was simply a unit for storing energy and using it later. So why must it specifically be in one fixed place? She then reminded Moon that he already possessed the best energy storage and concentration unit in the world. Herself, Moon pondered her words and soon realized that she was right. Ever since he had created legendary weapons and absorbed ancient knowledge, the Philosopher's Stone had functioned with greater efficiency than any energy reservoir or database in existence. With a knowing smile, Moon looked at the stone and acknowledged her wisdom. You're absolutely right. There was no reason Moon shouldn't use the Philosopher's Stone as his Danshan. In fact, it might even be the best possible choice, even as he trained in the heavenly demon art. He reminded himself that he was still an alchemist at heart, and could never forget his origins. As he returned to the real world, notifications flooded his vision, informing him that he had successfully absorbed magic creature stats, and that his Dantian had now merged with the Fauci. Loss of stone. Another notification followed, stating that his energy stat was now directly linked to his alchemy power. Confusion flickered across Moon's face. How could the two possibly be connected? He quickly checked his status display, noticing that demonic energy now labeled as magic creature stats had been integrated into his abilities, But what puzzled him more was the number. It had already reached 8 despite just absorbing it. The Philosopher's Stone, ever perceptive, explained that it wasn't merely about numbers on a screen. There was a proportional relationship between creature stats and alchemy power. As he examined his stats, Moon noticed that his alchemy power sat at 17, roughly twice his creature stats. A thought crossed his mind, and he voiced it aloud, wondering if this truly meant that increasing his alchemy power would automatically raise his magic creature stats as well. The stone confirmed his theory, adding that its presence had always influenced his growth. However, she warned, he needed to maintain an even number in his alchemy power to efficiently divide it for creature stats. Fascination took hold of Moon. Simply by increasing his alchemy power, he could enhance his magic creature stats, an incredible advantage, especially with the upcoming arena competition looming before him. As the day of the competition arrived, tension filled the air. This match was unlike the others, a survival battle. 100 participants gathered, each eyeing the battlefield with varying levels of confidence and unease. Among them, a man exuded nervous energy as he spoke to his audience, explaining the sheer difficulty of survival matches, particularly when top-ranked players participated. He urged his viewers to pay close attention to his commentary, for this match included some of the most famous players from the highest ranks. This man, known as Money King, addressed a small group of younger individuals, referring to them as his clients. He explained with a sigh that survival matches were the worst possible scenario for the service he provided. From his words, it became clear these individuals had paid him to help them win, to secure victory effortlessly. But now in this match, that guarantee had crumbled. Frustration surfaced among them. One of them, his voice laced with irritation, reminded Money King that he had already paid 10 million won and demanded to know if he would be getting a refund. The group fell into an argument, each member growing agitated over their lost money. But Money King remained calm, reassuring them that they need not worry. He reminded them that in this match, rewards were distributed from rank 50 all the way up to first place. With a confident smirk, he asked if they truly expected him to secure them the top 3 positions. At their hesitation, he assured them that he could. Standing tall, he formally introduced himself once more. The Money King. His services were expensive, but they delivered results. Even his audience knew that. A flicker of trust reignited in his clients. One of them, still wary, admitted that he had chosen to work with Money King because of his reputation. But how exactly did he plan to secure victory? The answer was simple. They would form a team. Surprised reactions met this statement, but Money King clarified his plan. His clients only needed to hire. He would handle everything else. Their skepticism lingered, but his confidence was unwavering. No one would be able to find them. This would be easy. The plan was foolproof. First, he would eliminate all the competitors. Once the battlefield was clear, he would remain alone with them, at which point he would take his own life, ensuring that his clients claimed the top 3 spots. One of them, intrigued, asked if that meant they would decide their rankings among themselves. With a nod, Money King confirmed that they had all paid the same amount, so he had no reason to interfere with how they divided the final standings. Praise erupted from the audience, admiring his professionalism and fairness. But then an unexpected presence arrived at the match, location shifting the atmosphere in an instant. It was none other than Moon. Surprise rippled through the crowd as eyes turned toward him. Money King, unfazed, merely commented on their apparent luck. A free kill had just presented itself. The live chat buzzed with excitement and confusion, noting that Moon had entered the match without a single weapon in sight. King's strategy did not change. He immediately ordered his team to hide, focusing his attention on Moon. The battle was about to begin. A sudden series of notifications flashed before Moon's eyes, declaring that, due to his achievements, the rules would now be adjusted. From the next match onward, he would no longer be required to undergo rank evaluation tests. He considered the implications. Perhaps they would assign him a ranking soon, a development that could finally allow him to climb higher. He recalled how before his return, he had been stuck at rank 1, a status that had proven utterly useless. But this time would be different. With his regained mana and immense power, this was his perfect opportunity to rise. Then a realization struck him. He had forgotten to start streaming the match from the beginning. Annoyed at himself, he quickly activated the broadcast, though he held no expectations, knowing he had no followers. However, the moment the stream began, he was bombarded with notifications. Zeus, the Black Goat, and even the Heavenly Demon were watching his broadcast. Before he could process, this king launched his attack, his expression filled with certainty. He was clearly enjoying himself, confident that Moon would be nothing more than a momentary distraction before being swiftly eliminated. His strike landed with immense force, and for a brief moment, King grinned. Assured of his victory, a player like Moon, especially one without any weapons, stood no chance against someone on the verge of reaching diamond rank. But then his grin faltered. Moon was still standing entirely unscathed. Not only had he blocked the strike, but he immediately countered, delivering a blow that sent King staggering backward. Shock flashed across his face. This wasn't possible. Someone of Moon's level shouldn't have been able to retaliate so easily. The comments section erupted in a frenzy. Viewers speculated wildly, questioning how Moon had managed to block such an attack without any visible equipment. Some accused him of cheating, others watched in stunned silence. King, recovering quickly, narrowed his eyes. He admitted almost begrudgingly that Moon clearly knew how to fight despite his unassuming appearance. Moon, meanwhile, had already analyzed the situation. King's lack of visible injury after his counterattack meant he had used a technique instant dodge. It allowed the user to shift the impact location at the last moment, minimizing damage. His suspicions were confirmed as he observed King's equipment, realizing that he was a martial artist, a detail that explained much about his combat style. At the same time, the Philosopher's Stone whispered within his mind, informing him that 3 players were hiding nearby. Their exact locations were revealed to him in an instant. Moon's gaze flickered back to King, a new understanding settling over him. So this was the infamous carrying service. He voiced his realization aloud, questioning whether King was the one running it. King chuckled, unbothered, and admitted it outright, even asking how Moon had figured it out so quickly. Moon's voice remained steady, as he told him that it had been obvious from the start. He had no respect for those who manipulated the system, taking money to carry beginners into matches. The memory of players who had risen through the ranks without any real skill surfaced in his mind, and with it a deep disdain. Those who rode the system and those who enabled them were no different. In his eyes, King sneered, dismissing his words with a wave of his hand. All weaklings talk like you do. He stated his confidence unwavering. He then taunted Moon, claiming that even if he knew about the service, it didn't change anything. His viewers seemed to agree, flooding the chat with laughter and insults, calling Moon an unevolved monkey who understood nothing but Moon saw through him. The bravado, the taunts, it was all a psychological tactic meant to unnerve him. Amused, he responded in kind, mocking King for such a transparent attempt at manipulation. Was this really the best he could do? Had his skill as a player declined so much that he had to resort to mind games instead of combat? King's jaw clenched, his fingers twitching as anger flared within him. Yet, he tried to maintain his composure, throwing back a retort, laughing as he asked if Moon was angry. But Moon merely shook his head. Not at all, he said coolly. He had a mission to complete, and nothing King said would shake him. Backing down now would be disgraceful. King let out a burst of crazed laughter, tilting his head back as he mocked Moon's self-importance. The very idea that a mere bronze-ranked player had received a mission was absurd. He continued to laugh, encouraging his viewers to join in. But Moon remained unfazed. His voice was unwavering as he declared that he did, in fact, have a mission one assigned to him, even in the placement test. He then launched himself forward, charging at King with unrelenting force. King smirked, believing that he had successfully lured Moon into his trap. Now he thought he would make him pay for that earlier strike, but as his attacks lashed out, Moon dodged them with effortless precision. No matter how many strikes King attempted, Moon avoided them with ease, his movements fluid and calculated. Frustration mounted in King's expression. His strikes became faster, more forceful, but none of them connected. With gritted teeth, he delivered a final, more powerful blow, determined to end it. But once again, Moon dodged, and this time he countered. His fist collided directly with King's stomach, forcing the breath from his lungs. King's body lurched backward, his eyes widening in shock. King couldn't understand it. No matter how many attacks he threw at Moon, the man avoided them all with effortless precision, countering at just the right moment, striking at his weak points. As if he had studied King's movements for years, staring at his opponent, King felt the creeping realization. This was no ordinary fighter. But more than that, the sheer humiliation of being outmatched in front of countless spectators gnawed at him. He had to turn the tide, had to reassert his dominance before his reputation crumbled. Determined, he sprang to his feet, his muscles tensing as he decided to go all out. This match needed to end, and it needed to end in his favor. Channeling every ounce of power, he launched his strongest attack, his fists striking with the force of a seasoned warrior. Yet to his absolute disbelief, Moon blocked it with ease. King barely had time to register his own failure before Moon countered with a devastating blow, sending him hurtling backward. He lay there, his breath ragged, his mind spiraling. Where had Moon acquired such monstrous strength? His team called out to him, their voices laced with worrying, but he didn't respond. His pride wouldn't allow it, gritting his teeth, fury overtaking logic. He lunged at Moon once more. He had to win. He had no other choice. Meanwhile, Moon's mind was elsewhere, contemplating the principles of the heavenly demon, divine technique. He recalled its teachings. The path of demons was a path of destruction. Harnessing that power, he unleashed a violent explosion where King stood, watching as his opponent howled in pain, his body writhing under the overwhelming force. King's screams, laced with agony and disbelief, echoed through the arena, a stark contrast to the arrogant laughter he had displayed earlier. Summoning the last remnants of his strength, King roared in defiance, charging at Moon one final time, eyes wild with desperation. Moon saw it clearly. King had finally tapped into his full potential. In a normal battle, he might have dodged, played it safe. But this was no ordinary fight, and Moon had a mission to complete. He surged forward, merging the ogre's body structure with the heavenly demon domination technique, meeting King's charge head-on. The impact was cataclysmic. Blood splattered across the arena as King let out a hysterical scream. The force of the explosion had torn through him mercilessly. The once proud fighter collapsed, his hands severed, his body broken. A notification flashed before Moon's eyes. His first kill of the match had been confirmed. More notifications followed, informing him that the match rewards would increase. This wasn't going to be an easy stage, and he knew it. Another message appeared, and for the first time, it wasn't just the system recognizing his efforts. The heavenly demon himself was pleased. A reward of 500 achievement points was bestowed upon him. Moon straightened, determination burning in his chest. If the heavenly demon was watching, he had to give it his all. Before he could react further, another notification arrived. Irina itself had awarded him an additional 1,000 achievement points, an unheard-of bonus. The reason became clear as he read the next line. 3 of the Constellation Kings were now supporting him. A surge of excitement ran through him as a new title was bestowed upon him, one he had never heard of before. More than just a name, this title was dynamic. His abilities would continue to grow as long as the king supported him, but there was a catch. If any of them withdrew their favor, his abilities would drop just as quickly as they had risen. Checking his status, he noted with satisfaction that his abilities had all increased by 3 ranks. Save for his magic, creature stats, his mana. Fully understanding the consequences of dealing with the constellations, he resolved to accept any missions they gave him in the future. The power was too great to ignore. A sudden noise pulled him from his thoughts. Voices. Those who had been with King were still there. He turned toward them, his expression unreadable. 2 of them stood trembling, their faces pale with terror. They begged him to stay back, their hands shaking as they threatened to retaliate. Moon scoffed, wondering how people like this had even made it past the preliminary stages. They weren't warriors, just cowards who had bought their way in. Disgusted, he decided to end them without another thought. It was almost too easy. Just as he finished, another voice rang out from behind him. A calm, measured tone spoke, commenting on his incredible strength, as if he had been born with extraordinary abilities. Moon turned to find a man standing there watching him with interest. The man continued, stating that he admired Moon's lack of sympathy toward the weak. Moon's eyes narrowed as he told the man that he had misunderstood and that this place is a battlefield, so sympathy has no place here. The man only smiled and told Moon that it was exactly why he finds Moon impressive, because many possess great abilities, but few know how to use them properly. Moon studied him carefully. Something about him felt different. There was an aura of authority surrounding him. He watched as the man reached into his pocket and retrieved something, a card, which he handed over to the boat, telling him that the world doesn't operate on strength alone. Moon glanced at the card. He came to note that the man was named Jan. His eyes widening in recognition, his head snapped up as he asked if the man was there as a scout for China. Jan started explaining that the offer had originally been intended for King. He saw real potential in him, and believed it would have been a waste for him to remain just a bus driver. Moon listened carefully before questioning why the offer had not been extended to King. After all, Jan merely smirked, stating that he might still consider it if King continued his broadcasts. Moon's eyes drifted to the card in his hand, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. The name of the continental province was printed there, the largest guild in China and one of the two greatest powers in the world. His mind raced back to his past life, to a time when he had assumed that these people had yet to start making their moves. Yet, it was now clear that this time, they were acting early, seeking to secure talent before anyone else could. Jan's sharp gaze caught the slight shift in Moon's expression with an air of amusement. He noted how Moon seemed uneasy. He assured him that he understood his concerns, acknowledging the way Koreans perceived the Chinese, as if anticipating the exact thoughts running through Moon's mind. Moon, however, was not so easily swayed. He calmly countered that it was not about perception, but rather the undeniable fact that they had already obtained Korean citizenship and were controlling the matches in Korea. Jan chuckled at the accusation, unfazed by the tension in the air. He dismissed it as inevitable, explaining that global matches only truly began at the platinum level, and such control was merely a byproduct of the system. Yet he could see that Moon remained unimpressed. Tilting his head slightly, he asked if it was his persuasion tactics that were causing discomfort. Moon considered the question for a moment before responding with deliberate indifference. Jan's approach may not have been pleasant, but it was not irritating either. Persuasion, after all, had always been a tool of the world's great powers. He studied Jan carefully, wondering if this man had been trained by those who operated from the shadows, hidden from the public eye. But before he could voice his thoughts, Jan spoke again, his tone shifting to one of certainty. He laid out the offer clearly. 5 million yen up front, more than 920 million won at the current exchange rate, a substantial sum. But that was only the beginning. Weapons worth 5 billion won, armor valued at 1 billion won per piece, and a 3-year renewable contract. And if Moon agreed to acquire Chinese citizenship, an additional 50 million yen would be his. It was an offer no rational person would refuse. Jan's confidence was evident, as he added that over 90% of the players who received this proposal had accepted without hesitation. He waited, expecting Moon's answer to be the same. Moon's mind processed the details swiftly. 3 years was not a long time, and the contract imposed no serious constraints. For a moment, he appeared to consider it, then extended his hand, meeting Jan's gaze. As he took his in a firm grip, a small smirk played on Jan's lips, convinced he had secured another valuable player. But the moment Moon's grip tightened, the smirk vanished. Pain shot through Jan's hand as Moon's fingers dug into his flesh with unnatural force, the pressure so intense that blood began to seep from his skin. A sharp gasp escaped him as he struggled to pull away, but Moon held him in place, his voice cold and unwavering. A man in Jan's position should be able to assess people correctly, he mused. If he had done so, he would have realized that Moon was never going to accept such an offer. Jan coughed violently, his body betraying him as the pain intensified. With desperate eyes, he demanded to know why Moon was rejecting the offer. The answer came without hesitation, simple and insignificant yet absolute. The term simply did not appeal to him. Jan's condition worsened, his breaths coming in ragged gasps as he tried to suppress another bout of coughing. Meanwhile, Moon remained composed, his mind resolute. He had dealt with these people before, had made mistakes in the past that he refused to repeat. This time, he would not be ensnared in their web. Releasing Jan's hand, he turned away without another word. His path was clear. The match awaited him, and he intended to continue forward without looking back. King sat in his dimly lit room, his hands clenched into fists as he seethed with rage. The humiliation he had suffered in the match was unbearable. As a player on the verge of reaching the diamond level, losing to someone unranked was beyond comprehension. His followers were just as stunned, flooding the chat with questions and speculations. He stared at the messages on his stream, his mind racing for a way to salvage his reputation. Then an idea struck him. If Moon's strength was truly unnatural, there had to be an explanation. His voice trembled with barely restrained frustration as he addressed his audience, planting the seed of doubt. Perhaps Moon had used a hack. He suggested manipulating the system in a way no normal player could. Someone at Moon's level simply shouldn't be able to fight like that. His experience told him this was impossible. King exhaled sharply, his anger momentarily cooling as he made another calculated move. Under normal circumstances, he would never issue refunds to his subscribers, but given the gravity of the situation, he announced that he would make an exception. This time, the chat exploded with praise. His followers reaffirmed their trust in him, their faith momentarily restoring his confidence. With a measured breath, he declared, "The end of the stream," but the fury did not subside. The moment the broadcast shut down, he hurled his communication device against the wall, his frustration boiling over. Moon's techniques had defied all logic. No one from the DC should be capable of such martial arts, at least not below level 100. King racked his brain trying to place Moon among the elites he had encountered before. Could he be a prodigy like Sihuk or Lee? That was impossible. Those kinds of players never bothered with matches at this level. His mind replayed the fight over and over. Throughout his time as a bus driver, he had faced countless players, some strong, some weak. But never had he encountered someone like Moon. The thought alone made his stomach twist in resentment. He had deliberately thrown matches to remain in the lower ranks, capitalizing on an easy business opportunity, and yet his calculated approach had crumbled in the face of an unranked opponent. It couldn't have been a fair fight. There had to be some trick behind it. Then a realization hit him. Moon had mentioned having a mission. Curiosity flared, and he hurriedly reopened Moon's stream, hoping to uncover some clues. The moment the screen loaded, his breath hedged. A chaotic battlefield stretched before him, and in its midst, a player was desperately trying to escape. The man's voice trembled with terror as he screamed that it was impossible for Moon to be this strong without any equipment. King leaned forward, his heart pounding. He had expected something unusual, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. He watched in stunned silence as Moon continued to move with effortless precision, his combat style refined to perfection. Each attack and counter was executed with an elegance that belied his supposed rank. How could someone this skilled still be unranked? More baffling still, how was he navigating the mind's labyrinthine tunnels with such ease? The entire area was a network of pitch-black corridors. Yet Moon moved as if he had no need for sight at all. Determined to investigate further, King joined the stream's private chat. Only 3 viewers were present, and none of them had spoken. Yet he hesitated for a moment before typing a message. Before he could receive a response, another message appeared, one that made his pulse quicken. Someone recognized him. They had been trying to reach him ever since his stream ended. King's brows furrowed as he assumed the person was one of his clients, demanding a refund. He assured them the money would be returned before the day ended, but the reply that followed left him speechless. "We don't care about the money." Confused, he checked his private messages. The sender's name made his breath hitch. Ho Jan. His frustration melted into excitement as he read the message. The same offer that had been presented to Moon was now being extended to him. Relief washed over him. After everything that had happened, after the disgrace he had suffered, finally, there was an opportunity to reclaim his dignity. But just as his confidence began to settle, another notification popped up in the chat. A new message from Zeus. King's eyes narrowed. The name alone irritated him. How absurd, these trolls shamelessly taking the names of the constellations just for attention. The sheer disrespect was infuriating. He scoffed and typed a message in response, calling them out directly. Then something unexpected happened. Both Zeus and the heavenly demon responded almost immediately. Their messages, simple question marks, as if they did not understand his complaint. King's fingers hovered over the keyboard. His frustration turned to suspicion. Were they really pretending? Or was this something more? He typed again, accusing them of attention-seeking antics, insisting that once his followers arrived, their tricks would be exposed. Moon was deep in the middle of a match when he received an unexpected update. Meanwhile, King was left in shock after receiving an insult from the Black Goat Inn. He couldn't believe the audacity of this group to speak to him in such a way. The tension between them was growing, but the scene quickly shifted back to Moon, who had just taken down another opponent in the match. A screen popped up, showing that Moon had already eliminated 20 players, while the second highest player had only 3 kills. This reassured him that his position as the top player was secure, even if he took a break. However, his mission status still showed as incomplete. Confused, he checked the details, only to find a vague objective that instructed him to walk a path of dominance. As he stood there, Moon suddenly sensed something unusual in the area. Activating his all-body tissue ability, he spotted a strange crystal-like object. Unable to identify it, he moved closer. Using his Black Panther's body tissue ability for enhanced senses, he picked up the object, wondering if it was silver or something more valuable. Just then, the Philosopher's Stone, a powerful entity, asked if this was the material they had been searching for. Moon hesitated, but decided to check its information screen. After reading the details, he confirmed to the Philosopher's Stone that this was indeed the item they needed. The stone reacted with excitement, urging him to take it quickly. Moon was surprised to find such a rare material in an abandoned mine, but he secured it for later verification. As he continued, Moon suddenly remembered that his live stream had been running the entire time. He quickly returned to the broadcast, only to be shocked by what had happened. He had granted the constellations, including the Black Goat, moderator privileges, but now he saw that the Black Goat was aggressively banning new viewers. To his horror, over 1,000 users had already been banned, and the chat was in chaos. Despite this, the controversy was drawing even more viewers, making the audience grow rapidly. Realizing the situation needed immediate attention, Moon activated his microphone and asked if King had started the insults. A notification appeared, confirming that Zeus nodded solemnly in response. Moon then asked if the issue was close to being resolved, but just at that moment, Money King's audience joined in escalating the situation further. The Black Goat growled and agreed, then sent Moon a message stating that it would eliminate King if he gained any achievement points. Moon quickly stepped in, telling the Black Goat that this was impossible. He reminded them that if they interfered before the official battle began arena, the governing entity would not tolerate it. At the same time, Moon knew that angering the Black Goat could put him at risk of losing the title of Chosen by the Three Kings. Losing this title would cost him a massive number of points, possibly affecting his abilities. He understood that he needed to handle the situation carefully. Trying to calm the Black Goat, Moon spoke gently, assuring it that he would reopen the chat if any similar incidents occur. He advised them to simply ignore the provocations. However, the Black Goat replied that it did not care about foolish humans. Moon chuckled and responded that he knew that, but he also knew that the Black Goat cared about him. Hearing this, the Black Goat's face turned red with embarrassment, and it nodded in agreement, while Zeus and the heavenly demon smirked at the interaction. With the situation finally settling down, Moon felt relieved. He then casually reminded them to keep their true identities a secret for a while longer. He knew that in this era, a nation's strength was measured by how many players it had that were sponsored by the constellations. If their connection to him was revealed, there was a high chance that powerful factions would try to recruit him, or worse, eliminate him. Since he was yet to be officially ranked, he needed to stay under the radar. Many believed that anyone who couldn't be controlled should be removed, making secrecy all the more necessary for his survival. Moon resumed his stream after receiving agreement from his moderators. As soon as the broadcast was live again, he noticed the audience was still fixated on the previous incident. He quickly addressed their concerns, clarifying that it had all been a joke orchestrated by the moderators, though it had escalated unexpectedly. Fortunately, the atmosphere in the chat shifted as viewers started laughing it off. The tension eased, and Moon felt a wave of relief. Just then, he received a notification. His first ever donation. Someone had contributed 100 achievement points and left a message expressing interest in following his future streams. Grateful Moon thanked them, realizing that while celestial support was beneficial, building a dedicated audience was just as crucial. Reflecting on his past life, he recalled how Sihuk and Liu had used streaming to gather achievement points. His viewer count soon exceeded 5,000, bringing in an additional 500 points. He recognized that maintaining this momentum could help him gain even more. As fans began complimenting his looks and smile, he decided to refocus on his match. Before continuing, he reminded everyone to keep the chat respectful. Later, when Moon returned home, he was pleased with his new communication device, which had made his day much easier. As he reviewed his rewards, he was thrilled to see he had advanced 5 ranks in just one match. Additionally, the Philosopher's Stone had gained experience of 3 levels, which is equal to 8 levels. While processing his achievements, he noticed that viewers were still interacting in the chat, even after the stream had ended. One comment stood out. It mentioned that he had yet to set a background image for his waiting screen. Realizing he didn't have one, Moon admitted to his audience that he was still new to streaming, but promised to find a suitable image. Soon, to his surprise, many viewers eagerly offered to help him choose one, with some even volunteering to create a design for him. This unexpected kindness deeply moved him, having spent most of his life at level 1 with no abilities. He had never imagined he would receive such attention and support. Touched by their generosity, he expressed his heartfelt gratitude before ending the stream, promising even better content in the future. His viewers were reluctant to let him go. They respected his decision. After logging off, Moon sat on the floor feeling a genuine sense of joy. He admitted to himself that streaming might become something he truly enjoyed, that the Philosopher's Stone warned him not to become too attached. It reminded him that it was his only real companion. Moon reassured the stone before shifting his focus to something crucial: his player ranking. Checking his notifications, he found that he had been nominated for the Platinum level due to his recent performance. However, the ranking review was still in progress. Rather than feeling impatient, he decided to take a break and grabbed a drink. It made sense that he wouldn't be placed in Platinum immediately, considering how much effort other players invested to reach that level. When the final results arrived, he was presented with two options. He could accept a silver ranking, which would cost him 30% of his experience points till ranking up, or a gold ranking, which came with additional rewards and 10% bonus experience. His instinct was to choose gold, as it seemed the obvious choice. However, something made him hesitate if gold was the better option. Why was silver even available? Sensing a hidden factor, he decided to investigate further. The Philosopher's Stone urged him to make a quick decision, but Moon wanted to be certain. He remembered the mysterious crystal he had found in the mine and pulled it out, while the system identified it as a valuable material for manufacturing. He wanted the Philosopher's Stone to analyze it further. The stone hesitated, explaining that the analysis would consume a large amount of energy. Still, Moon insisted he needed answers. After the examination, Moon learned that the metal was called mithril, but it wasn't just ordinary mithril. It was a rare variation from Doria that acted as a key to a unique battlefield called the Fiery Mine, Nightmare Arena. The Philosopher's Stone was stunned and Moon himself was caught off guard. This revelation meant that mithril wasn't just rare, it was priceless. With it, he could enter an exclusive battlefield with unconventional rules, suggesting that the rewards inside would be extraordinary. Understanding this, Moon finally realized why the silver ranking option existed. The system had classified mithril as an X-tier item, a ranking that had yet to be introduced, while SSS was currently the highest known tier. X-tier would become official in 3 years. Unlike other ranks, X signified uniqueness, meaning only one of its kind existed in the entire world. Since mithril served as a key to this special arena, the difficulty level there would undoubtedly be extreme. However, Moon quickly realized that there must be certain entry conditions. Since the system had provided the option to stay in the silver tier, it likely meant that if he moved past silver, the key would no longer be valid. Realizing this, he made his decision. He would remain in the silver ranking for now. Strengthening himself before advancing further would be the wisest strategy. As soon as he confirmed his choice, an official announcement was made. Moon had officially been ranked as a silver tier player. Moon had just received 500 achievement points, but there was a catch: 30% of his future rewards and match points would be deducted. Meanwhile, the most watched television program, the National Representative Arena, was airing. It was the top-rated broadcast, and today, the hosts were discussing the latest wave of arena champions. Their conversation focused on top players, with particular emphasis on one of them. They spoke excitedly about Sihuk's recent live stream, where he had taken down a powerful raid boss. The battle had been incredible, drawing over 500 million viewers. One host wondered how Sihuk had gained such an enormous audience so quickly. The other explained that Sihuk was no ordinary player. He was ranked and had the world's attention. The scene shifted to an office where two men were watching the broadcast. One of them chuckled, nudging the other, pointing out that his name had come up again on the National Representative League. The other man, revealed to be Sihuk, responded calmly, saying he had heard it clearly the first time. The first man smirked, noting how Sihuk never seemed to change his expression, no matter what. But Sihuk remained relaxed, saying that this was his break time, and that he would rather not be disturbed. His words irritated the other man, who demanded to know why Sihuk had chosen his office as a place to rest. Sihuk replied casually that he was an important client. The man scoffed, commenting that Sihuk had certainly grown skilled at asserting his dominance. Frustrated, he shouted that Sihuk couldn't just do as he pleased, but Sihuk only smiled, telling him to be patient. After all, he had nowhere else to relax. The man sighed reluctantly, admitting that he understood how tough Sihuk's life was. He walked over to make a cup of coffee, then handed it to him, suggesting he drink it to recharge before leaving. But Sihuk, caught off guard by the gesture, simply refused. He had no intention of going anywhere. His persistence nearly drove the man to madness, but in the end, he gave up, realizing there was no way to change Sihyuk's mind. Resigning himself to the situation, he handed over a file, stating that it contained the information Sihuk had requested. Sihuk flipped through the pages, asking if he had managed to find out anything about what he had mentioned earlier. The man, despite being annoyed by Sihuk's constant demands, admitted that he always found a way to get what he needed. Sihuk laughed and teased him, asking if he was treating the legendary Night Hunter Park Jae-jingwol like a mere servant. Hearing this, Park's temper flared. He snapped that if Sihuk wanted something, he should make a formal request like everyone else, instead of barging in and making demands. He added that Sihuk had plenty of money, just like all the other wealthy people who always thought they could get whatever they wanted. Sihuk reminded Park that he had paid for the previous job using arena points. The Park argued that he had no interest in arena points. He preferred cash. If he had cared about points, he wouldn't have retired from combat in the arena. Sihuk shrugged, saying their agreement had not changed. Park, however, was getting impatient. He warned that continuing to work with Sihuk could damage his reputation. When Sihuk tried to argue, Park cut him off, his voice sharp, but then something shifted. Sihyuk's playful demeanor disappeared, and his expression turned serious. He stated that if anyone dared to speak ill of him, they should be eliminated. Park was stunned. He stared at Sihuk, questioning whether he was really considering going up against the Korean Association. Sihyuk's innocent, gentle appearance was deceiving. His true nature remained unchanged. For the first time, Park felt uncertain. He wondered if Sihuk was truly serious. Hesitantly, he asked if he really planned to do this. Sihuk simply raised an eyebrow, acting as if Park's reaction was surprising. He explained that he was merely reclaiming what had been his from the start. Park looked at him in disbelief. Was Sihuk really going to challenge the Korean Association? A sense of unease settled over him. Whenever Sihuk wore that natural, pleasant smile, it meant he was at his most dangerous. Despite being a diamond-ranked assassin, Park felt an unusual tension. If he had been an ordinary person, he would be trembling right now. Breaking the silence, Sihuk asked if the file contained all the information. Park, irritated, asked if he wasn't satisfied with it. Sihuk admitted that while there were some unexpected details, he had already suspected Song Sam's involvement. He also noted that the operation was so vast that further investigation would be extremely difficult. Then, with his usual bluntness, he told Park that he was incompetent. The boy had given him a strong lead, and yet all he had managed to uncover was that Song Sam was involved. Park bristled at the insult, snapping that this was the best he could do. If Sihuk thought he could do better, then he should investigate it himself. Taking a deep breath, Park calmed down slightly and suggested they speak to Liu. If Song Sam was involved, she might have information. But Sihuk dismissed the idea immediately, stating that Liu knew nothing, neither in the past nor now. Park was confused. Based on what he knew about Liu's personality, she had likely figured something out. But Sihuk remained firm, saying that the information he had confirmed, that Liu was completely unaware of Song Sam's involvement. Meanwhile, the television in the background continued to broadcast discussions about Moon's live stream, and the moderators would use the constellations' names. Park turned back to Sihuk, making a remark about how strained his relationship with Liu seemed. But before they could continue, Sihuk suddenly became alert. He sent someone outside the door and asked Park if he was expecting a visitor. Park shook his head, explaining that he scheduled meetings with Sihuk only on office holidays when no one else would be around. But Sihuk kept his eyes on the door. Someone had managed to track down the great night hunter. Moments later, the door creaked open, and a voice called out, asking if anyone was there. The stranger hesitated before asking if this was really Park's office. Park looked at the intruder in confusion. His office was closed today. If they had business, they should return another day. But then he realized something, as Sihuk had vanished. Park thought to himself that Sihuk was getting even better at disappearing. Despite being a skilled assassin, he couldn't help but admire his ability. Meanwhile, Sihuk remained hidden, his hand gripping his sword, carefully listening to the new arrival. The stranger apologized for coming at such a time, but mentioned that they had a small request. Park, now suspicious, subtly moved his hand under the table, where he had a concealed weapon. If necessary, he would use it. Park moved toward the mysterious man, his weapon ready. At the same time, Sihuk leapt from behind his sword aimed at the stranger's back. The man stood frozen, caught between Sihuk's blade and Park's weapon, his face filled with shock and confusion. He couldn't understand why he was being attacked, but then Sihuk's eyes widened as he recognized the man. It was Moon. Immediately, he lowered his sword and told Park that Moon was his brother. Moon looked at him in surprise, wondering why he was there, while Park stood in disbelief, trying to process the situation. Soon after, the three of them sat together, Park sipping tea. He tried to understand what was happening. He asked Moon about his visit, reminding him that he had mentioned needing a favor. Moon explained that he was looking for someone. Park assured him that he had come to the right place. Moon knew this already, since Park was known as the Hunter of the Night, an SS-ranked expert in assassinations and intelligence gathering. This made Park the best person to find anyone, no matter where they were hiding. Moon then explained that he didn't come to Park just because of his skills and assassinations, but also because of his talent for gathering information. He looked at Sihuk, puzzled by his presence in Park's office. Sihuk seemed tense and avoided eye contact, making Moon wonder if his brother was still worried about events from their past. Concerned, Moon asked why he seemed so anxious, and why he was with Park. As Sihuk couldn't find the words to answer, his face turning red with embarrassment seeing his discomfort, Park stepped in, explaining that Sihuk was one of his most important clients. This shocked Moon as he didn't remember Sihuk and Park knowing each other at this point in his previous life. Curious, Moon asked if they were close friends, but both Park and Sihuk quickly denied it. Park explained that because of his work as a hunter, he often ended up working with Sihuk, sometimes feeling like his servant carrying out his orders. Sihuk responded formally, asking Park not to say such things. Moon chuckled, commenting that his younger brother had a talent for irritating others. Park agreed, laughing as he remarked that Moon knew Sihuk well. This annoyed Sia, who asked Moon why he was saying such things. Moon smiled, assuring him that it was just a joke. Amused by their interaction, Park noted that he rarely met a client he liked as much as Moon. He then asked who Moon was looking for and if the person was inside or outside the country. Moon replied that the person was in the country. Confidently, Park told him it wouldn't be difficult to find them, and asked if Moon had any more details. Moon shared that the person's name was Maki. She was 24 years old, and she lived in Bison Park. Park noticed that she was the same age as Sihuk, and asked if Moon had a close relationship with her. Moon quickly clarified that it wasn't a close relationship in the present, but he admitted in his mind that he knew her well in his past life. Before he returned to the past, Park confidently promised to find Maki, joking that if he couldn't do it with the given information, he might as well quit his job. Sihuk couldn't resist teasing Park, pointing at some documents and suggesting he should quit now. This irritated Parky, who firmly denied the possibility. He estimated that the search would take a few days, but assured Moon that it wouldn't be too long. Moon then asked about the cost of the service. After thinking for a moment, Park said that since Moon had already given him valuable information, and because it seemed to involve someone important to him, he would do it for free as a favor. Moon appreciated the offer, but refused to accept the service for free, explaining that as someone of diamond rank, he couldn't accept a favor from someone of Park's status without proper payment. Park laughed, noting how different Moon was from his brother. He joked that if Moon insisted on paying, he would take the money from Sihuk instead. Sihuk rolled his eyes, but said he didn't mind. However, Moon insisted that his brother had nothing to do with the request. Sihuk tried to assure him that it was fine and that he could afford it, but Moon remained firm, saying that this was about maintaining his relationship with Park. Understanding this, Park agreed to withdraw his offer, again, marveling at the difference between the two brothers. Moon then suggested paying for the service by offering another favor in return. Park was curious, and asked what he had in mind. Moon mentioned that he had heard about Park buying high-quality materials recently. This made Park nervous, and he quickly asked how Moon knew about that. Moon assured him that he meant no harm and only wanted to help. In his past life, Park had been a powerful night hunter, though retired due to a condition called monosclerosis, a disease that gradually hardened mana and eventually led to death. Although there was no known cure, Moon knew that a remedy could be made from ordinary materials. He had spent years researching this in his previous life, and was confident he could create the cure for Park. He also had another reason for wanting to help. When his brother was killed in his past life, Park had stayed by his side, never leaving him alone, if Park and Sihuk were closer in this timeline. Moon hoped it might prevent the events that led to his brother's death. Without hesitation, Moon told Park that he knew about his illness because of the specific materials he was searching for. This revelation stunned Park, leaving him speechless. Sihuk was even more shocked, standing up and demanding to know if it was true. Park felt uncomfortable his secret illness exposed so suddenly. He asked Moon how he found out, suspecting that his information came from the black market. Moon confirmed this, but assured him that those traders only cared about profit. Park then asked how Moon planned to help him. Moon confidently replied that he would make the cure himself using the materials Park had been gathering. Both Park and Sihuk were left speechless. Park asked if he could truly do such a thing. Moon's determination was clear, fueled by his past experiences and his desire to protect those he cared about. He was ready to change the future, no matter the cost. Park was stunned when he heard Moon's bold claim about curing monosclerosis. His eyes widened with disbelief, and he shook his head slowly. He explained to Moon that he couldn't believe him, because even the greatest alchemists had failed to find a cure. How could Moon succeed where so many others had failed? But Moon remained calm and told him that the details didn't matter. What mattered was his confidence in creating the cure. If Park didn't want to believe him, he could simply forget about it. Park felt conflicted. Could such a thing really be possible? Could he finally be cured? The thought was almost too much to bear, and he feared allowing himself to hope. Desperately, he asked Moon why he was offering to help, especially since he had earlier insisted on providing his service for free. Moon merely smiled and replied that maybe he just found Park's personality interesting. This answer only frustrated Park more, as he could never figure out what Moon was truly thinking. Moon stood up, his face firm with determination. He extended his hand and asked Park for his decision. Park hesitated, but realized that he didn't have any other choice. With a trembling voice, he asked Moon to take charge of the treatment. He shook Moon's hand and promised to give him all the ingredients he had gathered. Moon nodded approvingly, assuring him that he wouldn't run off with the materials. Before leaving, Moon asked Park to send over the ingredients and promised to inform him once the cure was ready. Park bowed his head with deep respect and agreed. As Moon walked downstairs with Sihuk, his brother refused to go home with him. Confused, Moon asked why. Sihuk explained that he didn't understand why Moon was searching for someone, or if it was related to events from 10 years ago. Moon playfully hit him on the head and reminded him that he had already said it was just an accident, but Sihuk persisted, asking if he was really sure about that. Moon responded that the people involved were known criminals, and that he had cut ties with them long ago. He then urged Sihuk to stop thinking about the past, including Liu. Moon thought back to his previous life. Back then, he was trapped by his regrets, but now he was free. He had let go of his guilt and was ready to focus on the future. He hoped his brother could do the same, because Sihuk had a significant role to play in the days to come. In the future, Sihuk would become a symbol of hope, and Moon knew he had to help him get there. He explained to Sihuk that a nation's strength depended on the number of high-ranking individuals it had. Sihuk teased him, saying he didn't realize Moon was so patriotic. But Moon clarified that it wasn't about patriotism. It was about maintaining his affiliation. He explained that losing one's affiliation would turn someone into a refugee, and the penalties that came with that would severely hinder their progress. In his past life, no one understood the importance of affiliation, but Moon did. Sihuk was curious about Moon's knowledge and joked about his mysterious information sources. He then asked why Moon needed help finding someone if he knew so much. Moon admired his brother's sharpness and decided to share some information. He pulled out a raw mithril crystal and told Sihuk to check its details. Sihuk was stunned when he realized that it was a key to enter premium matches, which were rare and valuable. Moon explained that he found it by chance and confirmed that his mana abilities had returned, along with his ranking. Sihuk was overwhelmed by the news that his brother had regained the abilities he lost due to him and Liu 10 years ago. Those abilities had shaped his brother's destiny, and losing them had changed everything. Now that they were back, Sihuk was thrilled and demanded to know how it had happened. But Moon refused to explain, urging him to stop asking questions and to focus on the future. Moon then revealed that he learned about affiliation when he obtained the entry key, which belonged to Class 10. It was the first time he had encountered such a classification. He explained that raw mithril came from the Doria Mountains, once inhabited by dwarves. Sihuk was amazed and realized that losing one's affiliation was dangerous, since it was connected to the entry ticket. Moon warned him that special matches always contained valuable information. Before leaving, Moon told Sihuk that he was going to prepare for the match and promised to contact him later. Moon was about to leave when Sihuk called out to him once more. Moon realized that his brother wanted to help him with the 5th match. Amused, Moon laughed and warned Sihuk not to offer any help, knowing that relying on others would only slow his growth. But Sihuk grinned and explained that he only meant to give him some equipment, as magical gear was hard to come by in the early stages. Moon declined, reminding him that as an alchemist, he didn't need any equipment. Still, he promised to reach out if he ever needed help, before finally walking away. Just as he was about to leave, Moon turned back and asked Sihuk what he did with the items he obtained from matches. Sihuk casually replied that he either sold them or got rid of them, since he had no use for them. Moon expected this answer. High-ranking players like Sihuk never bothered with items that could be sold for money. After a brief pause, Moon mentioned that there was actually something Sihuk could offer him, but he didn't elaborate further. Later, Sihuk returned to Park's office. Park was surprised to see him back, and asked why he hadn't left yet. Instead of leaving, Sihuk made himself comfortable, explaining that it was his day off, so he saw no reason to go. Annoyed, Park told him that he should learn a thing or two from his brother, but Sihuk responded that he could never be like Moo. Park didn't like this answer and asked what he planned to do about his brother. Park assumed that Moon would easily accept help from a high-ranking player like Sihuk, but he was shocked when Sihuk explained that Moon had flat-out rejected his help, warning him that relying on others would hinder his growth. Park burst out laughing. His respect for Moon grew even more. He was impressed that, despite being newly ranked, Moon already understood the importance of growing strong on his own. Sihuk mentioned that Moon had always been exceptional, even as a child. Park agreed, noting that it was clear from the way Moon had tested him earlier that he was no ordinary person. Park then asked if Moon had also refused help with equipment. Sihuk confirmed this, explaining that Moon didn't need equipment because he was an alchemist, but did agree to take some materials. Park was impressed by Moon's intelligence. He knew that alchemists were self-reliant and didn't depend on equipment. Moon clearly understood what he was doing. After all, he had the courage to stand up to someone with a diamond rank despite his lower ranking. Not only that, but Moon also spoke about creating a cure for manosclerosis, a disease thought to be incurable. Park was fascinated by Moon's confidence and ambition. He couldn't help but admire him even more. Lost in his thoughts, Park was interrupted when Sihuk asked about the girl Moon wanted to find. Her name was Maki. Park confirmed this and asked why Sihuk was curious. Sihuk explained that he wanted to investigate her more deeply. Park was irritated, assuring him that his work was always thorough, but then he realized that Sihuk was asking for a separate investigation, one that Moon didn't know about. Sihuk admitted that this was true, and asked Park to dig up everything he could about Maki. Park laughed, calling Sihuk strange. He was curious about why Sihuk was so interested in Maki. Sihuk hesitated before admitting that he felt like Moon was hiding something from him. This made Park uneasy. He asked if Sihuk meant that Moon was lying about the cure, but Sihuk quickly denied this, clarifying that he didn't doubt Moon's intentions. Instead, he was certain that Moon was hiding something else. Park was puzzled and asked why Sihuk was so concerned that he would investigate the girl. Sihuk admitted that he knew how strange it seemed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He explained that it was the same feeling he had 10 years ago. His mind drifted back to that painful memory, a memory he could never forget. 10 years ago, Sihuk remembered hiding as Moon urged him to stay out of sight. He could still feel the fear that paralyzed him, the terror that kept him rooted in place as he watched everything unfold with helpless eyes. He remembered the overwhelming sense of powerlessness, the crushing guilt of doing nothing as events spiraled out of control. Even now, the memory haunted him. Snapping back to the present, Sihuk told Park that he wouldn't let the past repeat itself. He could no longer stand by and do nothing. He was done with being protected while others faced danger. This time, he was determined to take action, even if it meant uncovering truths that Moon wanted to keep hidden. After leaving Park's office, Moon walked down the bustling street, his heart filled with satisfaction. He had achieved far more than he had anticipated. Initially, his visit to Park was meant to carry out the Heavenly Demon's mission, but he also secured all the materials Park the Night Hunter had gathered. This meant he no longer needed to worry about obtaining the ingredients for the elixir. His mind buzzed with possibilities, knowing that from this moment on, his path would be much smoother. The Philosopher's Stone, sensing his excitement, asked why he was so pleased. Moon replied that everything had fallen perfectly into place. Not only had he completed his mission, but he also gained valuable resources that would propel his plans forward. The Philosopher's Stone noted how different Moon became when it came to medicine, pointing out that his usual aggressive nature faded, replaced by a focused determination. Moon took this as a compliment, knowing how much his craft meant to him. The Philosopher's Stone then remarked on how different his brother Sihuk was in comparison. It found Sihuk's pure-heartedness almost unbelievable, and wondered if it was merely an act. Moon sighed, admitting that Sihuk's cunning and intelligence were boundless. Yet when the Philosopher's Stone suggested that he might be jealous of his brother, back at his home, Moon's thoughts wandered to another possibility. If he succeeded in creating a cure for monosclerosis, he could amass a vast fortune. The disease spared no one, affecting people regardless of their rank. High-ranking individuals like Park would be willing to pay any price for the cure. But Moon did not want to exploit their suffering. He needed the funds for something far more important. His primary goal was to protect his brother Sihuk from death and to save her from destruction. Memories of his past life flooded his mind, reminding him of the tragedies he had witnessed. He was determined to change the future, no matter the cost. Above all, he wanted Sihuk to live, to avoid the cruel fate that had befallen him before. To achieve this, Moon knew he needed more power. His gaze fell upon the obsidian tablet. Its current abilities were already powerful, but if he could enhance it, his chances of success will increase dramatically. He decided to double its power. This excited the Philosopher's Stone, which had been waiting for this moment. Checking his status, Moon saw that the enhancement required 10,000 achievement points. He wanted to keep a reserve of 1,000 points, but he currently had 10,450. After a moment of hesitation, he decided to go through with the upgrade. The need to protect his brother and change his destiny outweighed his desire for caution. The enhancement began, and the growth rate of the obsidian tablet rose from 20% to 40%. Notifications flooded his vision. Zeus and the heavenly demon were pleased with his progress, but the biggest surprise came from the black goat, which was extremely satisfied and donated 500 achievement points. Moon was stunned by this unexpected support. This generosity filled him with excitement and confidence, making him feel fully prepared for the upcoming special match. Using his VR visor, Moon transported himself to the special match arena, using the raw mithril crystal as his entry key. Upon arrival, Moon was surprised to find himself in a waiting area. This space gave him time to prepare before the match began. The Philosopher's Stone explained that this was a temporary space meant for preparation and warned him not to rush. But Moon's mind was already made up. His enhanced obsidian tablet and the achievement points from the black goat gave him the confidence to face a silver rank special match. He felt ready, his body surging with power. As he stood in the waiting area, Moon remembered his previous experiences with spectators. They were always vocal, their opinions sharp and often brutal, yet he decided to reopen the broadcast. Knowing his current low rank gave him some freedom from their judgments. To his surprise, 1,500 viewers were already waiting. They immediately flooded the chat with sarcastic comments, but Moon felt at ease. He realized he had gained their attention without creating any hostility. Greeting his audience, he informed them that today's match would be in a special arena, not just a regular fight. The spectators were shocked. Unable to believe that a silver-rank player could enter a special match, they began speculating about his abilities, their disbelief evident in the rapid flow of comments. But Moon paid little attention. Raising the raw mithril crystal, he unlocked the special match arena called the Fiery Mine Nightmare Arena. His objective was clear: to survive. Yet Moon knew there was more to this place than just survival. There was a hidden secret, and he intended to uncover it. Entering the arena, Moon noticed the eerie silence. There was no magical energy in the air or the walls. He wondered why the place was called a nightmare. It couldn't be just a name. Something terrifying was hidden within. His instincts screamed danger, and he remained on high alert. Just then, he felt a presence behind him. He turned and found himself face to face with a massive, terrifying creature. It was a draken, the weakest species of dragon, but still immensely powerful. Drakens typically only appeared before high-ranking individuals of the gold tier. The fact that one was here meant this place was truly a nightmare. The spectators were equally shocked, their fear evident in the chat. Moon received notifications that Zeus and the heavenly demon were displeased, while the black goat was deeply disappointed. He didn't understand why, but he had no time to ponder as the draken attacked with a ferocious roar. Its massive claws swiped at him, intent on tearing him apart. Moon's body reacted instinctively. He dodged the attack, feeling the rush of air as the claws narrowly missed him. Determined to test his new powers, Moon snapped his fingers, activating the enhanced abilities of the obsidian tablet. The air around him shifted, and a wave of energy burst forth, colliding with the dragon's attack. The battle began with a fierce clash as the dragon swung its massive axe at Moon. But to its shock, Moon was no longer there. Confused, the dragon searched the area until it spotted Moon clinging to the wall. Having used the Black Panther's ability to move with incredible speed, Moon taunted the dragon, then moved again in a blur, striking with the hobgoblin's power. Enraged by the audacity of a human attacking him, the dragon roared and lashed out with its massive tail. But Moon met the attack head-on, separating the tail from the creature's body. The dragon howled in pain, its anger intensifying as it vowed to kill Moon. It swung its axe with deadly force, but Moon dodged effortlessly, mocking the dragon for its clumsiness. Realizing it was time to end the fight, Moon launched his counterattack. Using the full power of the hobgoblin's strength, he delivered a devastating kick that obliterated the dragon with a single blow. The spectators watching the fight were stunned. They could not believe Moon had defeated such a powerful creature in just one hit, especially given his silver rank status. Moon himself was surprised by the ease of his victory, but quickly understood that his enhanced abilities were due to the obsidian tablet reaching 40% capacity. This allowed him to perform multiple transformations simultaneously, greatly increasing his strength. He felt a rush of power as he received notifications that the constellations were pleased with his performance. Moments later, they rewarded him with 1,000 achievement points, filling him with joy. Sitting atop the dragon's lifeless body, Moon reflected on his victory. He had never earned so many achievement points for defeating a single opponent before, but he realized the reward wasn't just for killing the dragon. It seemed the constellations harbored a deep hatred for dragons. This got Moon thinking about the Dragon Emperor, a powerful entity who had appeared on Earth in his past life, spreading devastation across Europe. The Dragon Emperor commanded even the mightiest dragons, making them bow before him. Moon realized that the constellations' hatred for dragons could be advantageous for him in future battles, as it meant they would likely support him whenever he faced such creatures. Determined to continue his journey, Moon ventured deeper into the mine. He wondered why dragons appeared so frequently in his matches, realizing they presented an excellent opportunity for him to gain more achievement points and strengthen his relationship with the constellations. Just then, a loud scream echoed through the mine. Moon followed the sound and discovered a group of dragons, one of whom was holding a blood-stained axe, laughing about their recent victim. But before the dragon could gloat any further, Moon snapped his fingers, causing a sharp earth spike to shoot up and impale the dragon, killing it instantly. The other dragons were stunned by what they had just witnessed. When they turned to face Moon, they were shocked to see that the attacker was merely a human. Before they could react, Moon snapped his fingers again, and another spike burst from the ground, taking out a second dragon. The remaining dragon lost its composure in a fit of rage, and charged at Moon with its axe, determined to avenge its fallen comrades. But Moon effortlessly caught the axe with one hand, his strength amplified by the draken ability he had just acquired. The dragon was dumbfounded, unable to comprehend how a human could possess such power. Moon mocked the creature's weakness, then used his power to bind the dragon's hand to its own weapon. The dragon struggled to break free, its eyes wide with fear and confusion. Realizing it was helpless, the creature began to beg for mercy, but Moon silenced it with a fatal blow from the axe. A notification appeared, informing Moon that his human transformation ability had leveled up. He realized that, since this was a special arena, the monsters here maintained their full strength, unlike the hobgoblins he had faced before. Yet, even with their enhanced power, they were no match for his abilities. Meanwhile, the spectators watching the battle were in complete awe. They had never seen anyone defeat 3 dragons so effortlessly. Their disbelief turned to excitement as they filled the chat with comments praising Moon's incredible power. Some were particularly fascinated by his ability to manipulate the earth with just a snap of his fingers. Moon remembered that during his fight against King, he had only relied on his physical abilities, never revealing his magical powers. He realized this had made his Earth manipulation even more shocking to the viewers. Deciding to address their curiosity, Moon explained that this was a world of magic, not just brute strength. When one of the spectators speculated that he was using spirit magic, Moon denied it, but the viewers remained skeptical. They began asking about his special attributes, to which Moon responded that he could not reveal such details. Yet he reassured them that magic played a crucial role in this world. While engaging with the viewers, Moon suddenly heard someone groaning in pain behind him. When Moon turned around, he was shocked by what he saw. A dwarven girl lay on the ground severely injured and barely holding on to life. Her body was covered in deep wounds and fractures, and it was clear she had endured unimaginable suffering. She looked up at Moon, pleading for help with desperate eyes. As he approached, Moon's disbelief grew. He remembered reading about the raw mithril of Doria, known as the key to the sacred land of the dwarves. It didn't make sense for her to be here, especially in such a vulnerable state. Moon knelt beside her, quickly assessing her condition. Her wounds were deep and her breathing was weak. The Philosopher's Stone inside him was astonished that she had survived this long, especially after facing ambushes and dragon attacks. The injuries were brutal, likely inflicted by dragons who seemed to take pleasure in tormenting their victims. Her body bore the cruel marks of their merciless assault. Acting fast, Moon tore pieces of his own clothing to use as makeshift bandages. He wrapped them around her wounds to stop the bleeding, but the Philosopher's Stone warned him that her condition was critical and she might not survive much longer. It even suggested that Moon should leave her and search for other survivors who might have a better chance of survival. But Moon refused. He couldn't just abandon her while he did not believe his actions were purely out of sympathy. Moon knew there was more at stake. This place was sacred to the dwarves, and that made her a crucial part of this arena. He also realized that reaching this location so quickly should have been impossible for someone at his current rank. Her presence here was completely unexpected. She should have died before the next player entered the arena, which meant she was essential to whatever was happening here. He was determined to keep her alive. Just then, Moon received notifications that the 3 constellations were closely watching his actions with great interest. He took this as a sign that he was on the right path. Opening his item shop, Moon began looking through its contents. The Philosopher's Stone asked him what he was planning to do, especially since they didn't have any alchemical tools with them. Moon replied with confidence that he could recreate them. He was, after all, an alchemist. The Philosopher's Stone admitted, somewhat embarrassed, that it had momentarily forgotten about Moon's alchemical skills, mostly because he had been focusing so much on his body transformations lately. Moon laughed and promised that he would give equal attention to alchemy from now on. He then focused on the tools he had pulled from the shop, preparing to create something that could save the dwarven girl's life. But time was running out. The girl groaned again, clearly struggling to hold on. Moon knew that even though he had all the ingredients, brewing a healing potion would take too long. He needed something faster, something powerful enough to stabilize her condition. Immediately, he asked the Philosopher's Stone for help in crafting an alternative solution. The Philosopher's Stone was hesitant, pointing out that her injuries were severe, and no known scientific material could heal her. But Moon already had another plan in mind. He decided to use achievement points instead. By converting these points into alchemical energy, he could create something beyond the limits of normal science. He recalled an item that would be perfect for this situation: a magical staff once owned by a legendary healer named John Wick. John Wick was known as the second best healer in the world, famous for his extraordinary healing abilities. His staff was no ordinary weapon. It was blessed by the constellation Asclepius, the god of healing. With this staff, John Wick could perform miracles, healing even the gravest injuries. Moon knew that with its power, he could save the girl. Moon decided to go through with his plan to create the staff. However, he was shocked to find out that it would cost him 500 achievement points to obtain it. He had expected it to be cheaper than the Thunder Spear, since it was of a lower rank. Confused by the high cost, Moon wondered why it was so expensive. The Philosopher's Stone then explained that although the staff was indeed 500 points cheaper than the Thunder Spear, it alone would not be enough to save the dwarven girl in her critical condition. Realizing the situation, Moon understood that the Philosopher's Stone had become more powerful, which caused the increase in cost. He admitted that this was not his preferred method, but he had no other choice. The Philosopher's Stone, slightly annoyed, pointed out that even if he had paid the original price, he wouldn't have been able to use the staff effectively. It explained that the additional points were necessary to make the treatment possible. Hearing this, Moon felt reassured. Realizing he could indeed heal the dwarven girl, he then reflected on his situation, acknowledging that copying an item beyond his natural abilities would naturally come at a high price. He also noted that despite his progress since his fight with King the bus driver, he was still only at level 12. However, he found comfort in knowing that his situation was far better than in his previous life, when he couldn't use magic at all, confident that everything would fall into place over time. He also recognized that his growth rate was exceptional. Determined to save the dwarven girl, Moon went ahead and crafted John Wick's staff, known as the Staff of Asclepius. Once the staff was completed, he learned that its abilities were so powerful that it could even bring the dead back to life. Yet, as always, he was unable to fully utilize its power for reasons unknown. He also noticed that the compatibility rate between his replica and the original was 33%, which was higher than expected. The Philosopher Stone explained that the increased compatibility was due to the additional 200 points Moon had spent. Without those points, the compatibility rate would have been just 25%. Moon reflected on how his thunder weapon only had a 10% compatibility rate despite also costing him 500 points. He realized that the rank of the constellation played a significant role in determining compatibility rates. The Philosopher's Stone confirmed his suspicion, but cautioned him against speaking about it aloud. Just then, Moon received a notification stating that the constellation Asclepius had noticed the weapon and was observing the sick dwarven girl. Moon pointed the Staff of Asclepius at her, and another notification informed him that Asclepius recognized the weapon. As he held the staff, massive beams of light enveloped the girl, instantly healing all her wounds and fractures. Moon watched in amazement, more impressed than when he had seen it on John Wick's broadcast before his regression. After the healing was complete, Moon noticed the staff beginning to fade, just like his other replicated weapons. However, he was surprised to feel no physical pain this time. He then approached the dwarven girl to check on her. Meanwhile, the live stream was flooded with comments from viewers who were stunned by what they had just witnessed. They were amazed that Moon not only excelled in combat and magic, but was now also capable of healing. Moon felt a sense of relief and joy as the dwarven girl slowly opened her eyes. However, she immediately screamed in shock upon seeing him. As if she had never seen a human before, she demanded to know how he managed to enter that place, but suddenly stopped, her face filling with horror as she remembered something. She cried out in distress, saying that dragons had invaded her homeland. Moon tried to calm her down, reassuring her that the area was now safe. Confused, she asked him what he meant. Moon then gestured towards the corpses of the dragons lying nearby. The girl stared at the bodies in disbelief and asked if he was the one who had defeated them. Moon confirmed that he had taken care of the dragons and that the area was now safe. Suddenly, the dwarven girl grabbed onto Moon's legs and began to cry uncontrollably. She pleaded desperately for his help, her tears soaking his clothes. Moon stood there stunned, unsure of how to react or what he could do to help her further. Both Moon and the dwarven girl started going through the dark alleys of the secret arena, even when the boy did not know about how he was going to help the girl. But as they were traveling, Moon was single-handedly dealing with all the dragons, shocking the girl, because she had never seen a human who can take down so many dragons in the blink of an eye. We get to know that the girl was named Morinelle, and Moon asked her about where they were going. Morinelle decided to lead the way, because the territory was familiar to her, and told Moon that they were almost there at the heart of the mine. Morinelle started running with insane speeds, and Moon decided to follow with a smile, because finally he was going to the heart of the mine, where the clues to clearing the arena will be. He knew that there must be something really significant inside, as they approached a huge door with a lot of stairs. But suddenly Moon stopped onto his place while looking in front of the door, and telling the girl that they might have taken a wrong turn because the place in front of him was completely blocked off. But after further inspection, Moon realized that maybe someone deliberately severed the connection of the mine to its heart. The girl smiled, telling Moon that in the Dwarvens there was an old saying that a wise dwarf digs 9 tunnels. The girl asked Moon to just hold on for a moment, and started tapping the wall of the place. And just by 2 or 3 taps, Moon was shocked to see that the whole place started trembling, and the rocks started falling like pieces of styrofoam. Moon looked inside, and realized that it was a secret passageway. The girl realized that this secret passage was reserved for the elder dwarfs only. The desperate times were calling for desperate measures, and even Moon knew that they would take ages to get to the main gate if they followed their usual route. The girl smiled, thanking Moon once again for saving her from the dragons of the Dragon Clan, realizing that they were probably all over the place right now, and this was the same reason that they had to use the secret passage. That the girl was sure that elders will surely understand the situation. Moon smiled compliment, tempting the girl in his mind, thinking that she was a really bright and cheerful child. While the girl was running inside the secret passageway happily, Moon just hoped that the child's spark of hope remains alive. She told our boat that if he followed this path, then it should lead them to the heart of the mine, and if they can just reactivate the defense systems inside, then those dragons would not dare to run wild anymore due to the deadly traps. As for the reinforcements, the girl was sure that the sharp ears of the dwarves have already caught the wine, and they will send them inside the mine as soon as the defense system gets activated. But all the hope and spark in her eyes were completely vanished, as she saw that the heart of the mine was completely destroyed, with the pillar broken down. As the scene shifts, we see that the girl was running towards the core of the heart of the mine, as she started crying while trying to find something. Finally, she was able to pull out a golden item, and Moon realized that it was the core of the heart. The girl's heart sank as she saw that the core was snapped in half, and even Moon was saddened looking at the item and realizing that its recovery was nearly impossible. But suddenly something struck his mind, as he looked at the shape of the core and thought that it was looking oddly familiar to something. Moon remembered that he had already snagged the reward, which was the diminished core of the mine, and even when the girl had lost all hopes and thought that she was gonna die at the hands of the dragons, Moon called out to Marinelle, asking her if this was the core that she was talking about. Moon took out the core and gave it to her, while the girl was shocked, wondering about when they had found the core. The whole audience was surprised by the use of such a normal-looking item, and all of them remembered that how in their silver rankings they had got it for their rewards, that they always tossed it away, thinking that it was purely useless metal. Moon was really feeling lucky, because he never throws away his items, thinking that maybe it will be used in alchemy and he can finally save the girl and the other dwarfs. But Marinelle broke the silence, crying even further, and telling Moon that she cannot use the core, which they use for mining, even when it was strikingly similar to the one used in the heart. Moon realized that the core in her hand was out of magic, that the girl corrected him, telling him that technically, it was not magic power, but rather the energy of Earth itself. She added that a mind core was the ultimate crystallization of that earthly intellectual energy. Moon started pondering over his ideas, wondering that usually a faded core of the mind is replenished with magic and was carefully refined. But if it was not magic, then maybe it was the brain power that has something to do with the earth. Moon knew that if they can recharge the core with its intelligence, they can truly uncover the power of the core mind. The audience was looking at Moon with their eyes staring their screens, because they knew that if the diminished core was revived in some way, then it will be sold in skyrocketed prizes. Moon was having a live audience of over 8,000 people, and it was continuously rising as he realized that he had kicked off the broadcast with only 2,000, but before he knew it, the number soared past 8,000 in an instant. Moon knew that sharing information in his streams does pay off, and he gets more engagement. He knew that even when he was putting all the secrets out, he can still make money from the viewers that are watching their broadcasts. So there was nothing to lose, and in fact, Moon was gaining so much more than he would have otherwise. Multiple people started donating arena points, and the total amount consisted of 3,200 AP, along with someone who had donated 100,000 AP. The viewer was from the Production Association, and Moon had got the biggest donation of his life that he never thought he would even get. Moon suddenly realized about how much an active mind core was worth, and a notification popped up congratulating him for completing the milestone of receiving 100,000 arena points, and for that, he received additional 500 achievement points. As the huge donations kept coming, Moon broke another record of passing 10,000 simultaneous viewers. The system gave him another 1,000 achievement points, and Moon smiled with his eyes glittering while he realized that the special arena was really something else. But he decided to snap out of all the commotion, because he had to focus as he was still in the arena and the girl was still crying. He told Marinelle that there was still a chance that they can activate the heart even with the diminished mind core. The girl was shocked, wondering about what Moon was going to do, but for working his magic, Moon needed help of the girl in standing up the pillar once again, because that was an important part of the device. Even when the girl was finding it hard to believe that everything would be alright, she was ready to put her trust onto Moon, telling him that the device was going to be completely fine if she took over the repairs. She started running and grabbed some tools real quick, and until then, Moon started talking to the Philosopher's Stone, asking her if the mind core can be restored. The stone started telling Moon that by fusing intellect with alchemy, a quick recharge will bring the core back to life in no time. Moon wondered if this procedure was even a thing, but the stone started explaining that even when Moon cannot transmutate into every type of energy, but common ones, like intellectual energy, were totally doable. Moon was not able to believe that it was actually possible, but he trusted the Philosopher's Stone and started the synthesis process. The stone just smiled, telling Moon that the structure of intelligence stat was super simple, and if it is Moon himself, then he will catch on in no time. Moon was focusing on the synthesis and grabbed the core in his hand while finally feeling the essence of sheer intellect itself. After a few moments, the core was golden once again, and it started floating from the hands while the system notification popped up, telling him that a crystallized core of grade C mining energy was regenerated. Once again, this core was capable of self-recovery, and it replenishes its own energy depending on the surrounding mineral density. After the core was completely finished, Moon turned towards the girl who was hammering the device and repairing it with all her might, and Moon just smiled, going towards her and showing her the energized core, which shocked the girl, but she immediately took it and started embedding it into the device. Moon was really surprised by this kind of enthusiasm and strength, wondering if even the dragons could stand a chance against her. But the girl heard it for a moment and took it offensively. Moon immediately got out and told her that it was nothing and that she should just start working. Finally, only the last step remained, and they will have to slot in the core into the groove of the center so that the engine can come back to working its magic. Moon grabbed the core and started slotting it in the engine, and a golden magic started materializing itself from the core. Both Moon and the girl looked at the device with smiles and amusement on their face while they wondered about what is going to happen. Suddenly, a golden ray of light started going upwards in the skies, while illuminating the whole heart of the mine, still being surrounded by astounding mysteriousness.